right, everyone. Welcome to the March 2026 DRC meeting. The DRC is a subcommittee of the Historic Zoning Commission. The meeting is informal and designed to guide applicants through the process of obtaining a certificate of appropriateness or a COA for projects within the city's historic districts in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines. Applicant participation in DRC meetings is voluntary but highly recommended. Changes made or suggestions taken by the applicant based on the discussions with the DRC are the applicant's choice, but DRC makes no representation as to whether any changes or suggestions made during the meeting will be approved by the voting body, the Historic Zoning Commission. We have 8 items on this afternoon's agenda. When the item is called, please introduce yourself and describe your item in 2 to 3 minutes. Item number 1. Discussion of in-kind replacement of building materials at 800 Fair Street. 800 Fair Street. Amanda McCreary is the applicant. Good afternoon.
Hello, I'm Amanda, Chisel Workshop. Hi guys. Okay, so we're here for 800 Fair Street. We've actually been before you guys a few years ago for this project, and we put an addition off the back and the screen porch off the back. At that time, when we were doing that work in the back, we knew that we had some trim that had been rotted, and we deferred it to a later phase. And so we're here before you at the moment to deal with that phase. So we have quite a bit of trim around the house. It includes on the front dormer. If you are looking at the front face of the dormer where the window is, all of that trim is to remain existing. It's the both sides of the dormer. The roof has been replaced and it was not properly flashed, so we've gotten water under the siding, and you can see the deterioration in the photos. We also would like to replace the soffit and the fascias. We've got quite a bit of deterioration all along on all 4 sides. Well, 3 sides. The back was already done when we did the addition. We know from our previous construction towards the rear of the property, when we were taking off the fascia at the rear and the rear portions of the front side, we had rafters that have some deterioration. So the fascia boards are not attached. We covered it back up because we knew we needed to tackle this all as a whole. So we do know we have some rafters we have to fix towards the rear that we could see. And you can see in the photos, there's quite a bit of soffit deterioration or fascia deterioration throughout those front facades. We would prefer to replace it all, as if we replace a piece here, we'll have joints, and a piece here, we'll have joints, and a piece here. We are looking to replace with exact same profile, exact same dimensions as wood. And then you can see in the soffit too, just through the photos. The soffit is actually a thin panel. I'm not sure if thin panel was historic. It's the like 1/4 inch panel board, not individual pieces. We also would like to replace the gutters and the downspouts. The downspouts will be full rounds. The gutters, we are proposing K-style. K-style is what's existing on the house. It does look like it mimics some trim boards on the house. But the portions of the back that we had done in a previous are new, and those are K-style. So we are not intending on replacing those. So we'd like to tie into those existing gutters. And then we do have some minor siding replacement, and that siding replacement, as it's deteriorated around the house, again, we'd like to go board to board as opposed to doing just little pieces, and that also will be wood, same profile, same dimension. And I believe since we're front and side facing and you can see it from the street is why we're before you all.
All right, let's hear from staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property at 800 Fair Street is part of the Hinchyville National Register Historic District. The proposal includes the in-kind replacement of several wood elements around the principal building. All of the in-kind replacement of the wood features align with the guidelines. The portion of the proposal that includes replacing the K-style gutters on the front and sides of the house with new K-style gutters does not exactly align with the guidelines, as they would recommend half-round gutters on the pre-1930s building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, just a question for you,
Sure.
Amanda. The rafter tails, they're they're enclosed.
They are.
They're just rotten inside.
We know at
Okay.
least
Okay.
some portions of the original front pyramid, at least the back several feet of portions are rotted. We remember that from the previous.
Yeah, I was just making sure that it wasn't anything that was visible to us anyway. So that
It's not.
replacement, if it happens, will be inside, but
Yes.
requires some pulling apart to get to. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anybody on the commission want to kick us off here with some comments?
I was
Brian?
going to ask
Go ahead, Madeline.
staff if they could clarify what it is about the gutters that doesn't meet the guidelines.
So our guidelines do recommend to use half-round gutters instead of K-style gutters for a pre-1930s construction building. It is existing on the building that there are the K-style gutters, so the guidelines would support changing the style to go to a half-round.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a picture or sample, some sort of example of the gutter that you're hoping will get installed?
Yes, it would be the existing, it would match the existing, and the portions of
Okay.
the pictures that are on the rear elevations from the about side, yes. So all of those are new.
Yeah. I was
From
gonna
that
say-
portion back, those are all new
Uh-huh.
gutters, and so we would replace from that portion forward to match the existing, so the K-style is continuous throughout.
Okay.
The downspouts will be replaced, so those will be the full rounds as opposed to the square.
Got it. Okay. All right. And same color, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, so
Yes, ma'am.
the old style downspouts would be on the historic part of the house. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, and it looks like
The
the
gutters
back
and-
is round already. The downspouts, not the
It
gutter.
does.
I think they are. Let me pull that back up.
Yeah, on that screen porch, that's a round downspout.
Yes, it is.
On a K-style. But
Yes.
the whole house has K-style now.
It does.
You're just replacing some that are old or damaged or,
Yes.
okay. And then the rectangular profile downspouts will be replaced to match the round, which does meet the guidelines. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Brian, did you
Yeah,
have
Mr.
something?
Chair, I have, so one question I have on the dormers and the flashing. So what kind of material do you plan to use flashing? Lead, copper, aluminum?
We planned on using a metal flashing that matched the color of the roof as much as close as possible, just so it would blend in.
Bronze, some
Yep.
kind of a metal
Yep.
dark bronze?
Yep. My favorite, dark bronze.
Copper would be fine too, but, yeah, when I think about the Secretary of the Interior's guidance on this for old houses and old material, especially the wood, they talk about first identifying, damage that's been done, what is still historical, and then they talk about repairing that before we talk about replacing it. So that's why I want to kind of explore, especially on that soffit material. If you think that the rafter tails have rotted, rather than taking all the soffit material off, could you just go in through the fascia board and sister against what's there for the fascia board? I'm just thinking of alternatives for this. And you mentioned that you thought it was panel board. And what I'm seeing in the pictures, it looks like what you would have seen on historic structure.
It's just really thin?
It would have been.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
3/4 inch generally.
Okay.
If that's what you were kind of looking
Yes,
for.
yes.
They were thinner boards, and, you can kind of see it in one of those pictures where one's kind of drooped down. some.
Right, yep.
Things like that could probably just be nailed back up. So I'm wondering, how much of it actually really does need to be replaced and how much does need to be repaired?
Well, and I think for us, the fascia boards are the most important because that's the area where we can see that we've got the rot coming from both directions, down and up, and that's where we know those rafter tails are having issues. I do think we would like to repair as much as possible in the soffit, or even pieces, if we can salvage enough pieces that in the front, we can use it to repair and that sort of thing. I think we're open to that.
But the bead board that we see underneath the soffit, you're not requesting removing all of that and replacing it, are you?
I think that's the desire, so we can just start from a slate that's maintained and is clean and and properly adhered and all of that. But if we're not open to that, we'll be open to suggestions.
Well, I would encourage, like the Secretary of Interior's guidance on that, is to try to repair what can be repaired, or, at least bring us an assessment that shows the extent of that damage. Is it that bad all around? Is it just in sections? Something to preserve that historic material. I can tell you, it's been there now 100 years, at least. And whatever you replace it with, it might last 25. And I'm wondering what you said, a wood type material. Do you know what kind of wood you were thinking?
I think in most of it, we were looking at, some of the portions were cedar, and some of it was Windsor One, which I believe is a poplar of some sort. I'd have to look back to you on that.
And I agree with you on the siding. It's better if you can replace. Now, it depends. Some if you have siding that's near a trim board, as far as a corner board,
Right.
it's just cracked a little bit. I mean, putty and
Right.
all that can be made. But if you've got a really bad board, it doesn't look very appealing when you've got all these shorties in there.
And we have a picture of that too, where that's happened now at the panel box, and that's what we're trying to avoid, is to have that just piecemeal in.
So, if you could look in more into that soffit and bring us more information on that, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody? No? Mary, did you have something else? No? Okay.
Well, I do. So is it my understanding that everything met the guidelines except for the gutters? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And really, it's just the profile of the gutters that's in question.
Yes, but also how the guidelines are right now, staff cannot administratively approve things that are on the front elevations that are highly visible for like replacement of elements, but
Right.
on the rear and, more obscured facades, we can.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason why it's before y'all.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to ask the applicant about, what is preferred. I mean, what is your thoughts on the half rounds and the K-style?
It's interesting, having done historic work here and multiple municipalities, I've seen quite a bit of K-style too, especially where it's to mimic trim and to have more of that trim crown profile. This house has a lot of ornamentation. It has the band that goes continuously around. It's got some ornamentation with the columns on the front. And the K-style gutter in this instance, I think, adds a bit of that crown molding profile to the fascia. And it's certainly not our desire to tear off anything has already been replaced and that is new. And so from a simplicity standpoint of that K-style gutters being continuous, I think would look more appropriate than having a half round that then transitions to a K-style. I think to me, that's going to say, hey, look at me, I'm an addition. And we try really hard to make our additions look seamless or at least fit historically to the context. I do love half round gutters. I think they're beautiful. I just think in this instance, the K-style gutter, with the trim profiling and that crown molding and that ornateness, along with that it's existing and we're keeping portions of the rear, is appropriate. I do think having the full round gutters also lends itself more to that historic profile as well, as opposed to the, rectangular typical gutters.
So in that instance, it's kind of a combination of both.
It is.
Yeah, given the style of that house, I don't think that the K-style gutters detract from the historic character of the street or the house. And I take your point. It's well taken. Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else? I tend to agree with most of what Brian said about just trying to see what can be saved and just tuned up kind of in situ there. And then, things have to be replaced as they come along. And, I try to play other scenarios in against our guidelines too, like say in the last storm, one little section of gutter got knocked off with a tree limb.
Right.
Would we make you replace everything, or just fix that one K-style piece that's already there today, we'd probably just say fix that one K-style piece. And I don't think it's inappropriate if we were talking about like a box gutter you'd see on a commercial building that's like a really square profile, we'd have a different conversation. But both of these are mentioned in our guidelines, but this house is right at that kind of point where you'd see maybe either or. And we can find probably more examples in Franklin of houses of this vintage with K-style gutters that maybe weren't original, but that's what they have now, than we would half rounds. So I don't have a problem either way with that, and all the in-kind replacement. Fix and replace what has to be, but repair everything that can. It may be that the siding in the dormer can be, cut back a certain height off the roof and flashing slid under, or even that siding taken off and put back up, because you may find that when you do that parallel cut line, you've got enough there that can be held on to, and the little pieces at the bottom, there may be nothing left because they're only
A little, the short.
Little
Are you
changes.
all, new, even our, we call them new old houses. When we're designing new houses, we want that aesthetic to feel old and rich, which is partly what we do. But we typically on our dormers now, we'll cut it and we'll have a rake board right there, just because we can flash it properly and have that rake board go across the bottom. That's parallel, even if it's small, because it's a better flashing condition. If your roof ever needs to be replaced, then you remove that portion, you replace your roof, you replace your flashing, and you just put that single trim board back. Are you opposed to doing that in this scenario? Because it's not there now.
yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, what I think this is indicative of old dormers.
It is.
And that's what we would want to see. I'm not going to speak for everybody, but typically there's a way they can flash it too and do the same thing
It
that
is,
you're with
yeah.
a flashing and sub-flashing, so you just can remove that from under the roof as you redo the roof over time. So I'd rather see a reveal with a little bit of space where water can run, and we're just looking at the flashing that's kind of receded instead of a white
Right.
painted board or
Right.
some variation thereof. Feel free, anybody jump in.
Yeah, that's
on-
fine. We didn't propose it, but I was just,
Yeah.
I'm here, so I was going to ask.
Mr. Chair, I would say I would support staff on the half-round gutters, downspouts, and gutters on the old part of the house. I think they really add to the fabric of the house.
Yeah.
Even as you're going down the street, I think they do. If you're looking at the district as a whole, if all the houses had gutters that didn't go with our guidelines, it'd be pretty profound. So I would agree with staff on that comment.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and you might bring some, when you come to a voting meeting, bring kind of the neighboring context of what
Absolutely.
gutters are around. Like I said, I'm sure we can find examples of both kinds and kind of similar vintage, so, okay. Anything else, anybody? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to item number 2 here. Discussion of alterations of accessory structure at 321 3rd Avenue South. Lawrence Sullivan.
Good afternoon, Lawrence Sullivan, as you said, 321 3rd Avenue South, Franklin. I have a very old garage door on a cinder block.
Make sure your button's green there.
I don't like green buttons. Lawrence Sullivan,
Thank you.
321 3rd Avenue South. I have a cinder block accessory building with a garage door front facing that's, needs to be repaired and now replaced is the better choice, I think. It is a 17-foot single door. I have found Cornerstone Door Company is going to help me with that. That's the picture that you have now in front of you. That is the existing door. The next one I chose from the two that they had That one is just an example of one that is a two-car garage door, so that it showed that were able to create one. I learned a new word while I was sitting there. That has the most reveal, so I like that the most. But I don't like the roping around the windows up there. It would be white if I chose that door, and I'd find different windows for it to be less ornate, probably. The next one coming doesn't seem to have as much reveal, but that is certainly one that they would be able to produce. I have found, I always liked Ken Moore's garage the best. It has those features on it of hinges and handles that are faux hinges and handles. I found out from the company that they are magnets. I imagine if they are still attractive, I could put them on or exclude them if it made more sense. So I would look for something that looked like that, but probably choose the more reveal if it was available from the brown one above, and was looking for your guidance.
Okay, thank you. Let's hear from Elizabeth, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is proposed to replace the garage door at 321 3rd Avenue South on a circa 1970 garage, which is non-contributing to the district. The existing garage door is non-historic or original to the building. The current door is a 17-foot wide aluminum overhead track door. The proposed replacement door would consist of a metal overhead door that emulates the appearance of a carriage-style door seen throughout the district with an 8-light pattern and raised paneling. The dog ear pattern design is not proposed for the replacement door. So the guidelines for historic garages and new garages recommends to design garage doors with similar proportions and materials to those traditionally found within the district. While this garage door is larger than those traditionally seen within the district, the proposed style is more appropriate for the non-contributing structure. So feedback about the proposed design of the garage door is appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, any comments?
Yes, Elizabeth's good, isn't she?
She's good.
Okay.
I'd like to say welcome to our merry-go-round,
Yes, sir.
because you are the purveyor of the merry-go-round
Yes,
at the
sir.
factory.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
Which do you prefer?
Of those items?
those two, ones you-
I prefer the look of the brown one, but it needs to be white, and I don't like the brown window. So if I couldn't change the window, I would move to the white one. I don't know that the magnets are necessary, but if they didn't look silly, or if they were added any elements of appeal, I would add the magnets.
Okay, so that's the one you prefer in that
Yes.
look? All right. Well, I agree with staff's interpretation and analysis of it. Thank you.
Am I done?
Well,
No. We'll see if
this
anybody
was
else
the
has
first
comments.
part.
Go ahead, Madeline.
I agree with staff that and with the guidelines that the dog ears don't make sense for this style, especially fitting with the house. But I also feel like the current door doesn't fit with the house. And I'd be okay with either of these styles minus the dog ears.
Okay.
Are
Thank
you
you.
proposing
And
dog
I-
ears?
No, sir.
No.
And also, not a dark color. I don't think that makes sense either.
I would propose, if possible, having it look like there's two garage doors, but it's actually one, just in look.
Yeah, let me see if they can, who knows if they can do something like that. They're pretty creative with these panels these days. So they may be able to do something similar. Anybody else? Holly?
I think both of these look like a really big improvement as far as the historic nature of your property, so, thank you. I
Thank
think
you.
that, yeah, either of them would be great.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on what my comments might have been, which is, traditional kind of carriage house doors had a little bit of reveal and texture, and the panels actually had some dimension to them. And different brands are better than others at that, so you may have to explore that a little bit. I agree that the brown door, those recessed panels actually look recessed instead of like a stamped kind of border. Actually looks like those panels are real panels. I too don't care for their light kit, is what that's called, because it's these things are made out of metal and foam, and then they basically glue two pieces of things to hold the glass in. Again, there's some brands are better than others at that, and that can really make or break the look of the garage door, and looking sort of cheap track house kind of look, or a traditional, almost like a style and rail built garage door. And that's what we're looking for, I think, is something that emulates a historic neighborhood, real style and rail garage door. So look at what Cornerstone brands they may carry. They may have different lines, and see what kind of does those things. Gets the window right, gives you that dimensional quality of that style and rail and recessed panel. But if it's one big door, not the end of the world to me. It'd be great if it were two, but and even one door that looks like two. Generally, they can widen maybe that center style and give it some texture too. So Bob's suggestion, if they can do it, is a good one. So, you have a question? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the brown one, excuse me, effectively shows that it's wider there in that center one. So
Yeah.
from a door standpoint, I
Yeah.
think we all lean to that without dog ears. And it's just, I need to do something with the windows and get the color right.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I also would be curious what the board has to say about hardware versus not hardware.
What do you all think? Hardware? We generally have
I would
asked
say
for it.
yes. I like the hardware.
I don't
Yeah.
mind the hardware.
You don't mind it?
I don't.
Yeah.
No.
We've generally asked for it because it replicates that historic
Historic
carriage house,
carriage
and it
house.
looks like it
Yeah.
opens in a French door format, which is indicative of old carriage houses. So we've asked for it on many occasions where people didn't include it. So I think it's probably best to include it. Yeah, whether magnet or bolted on or
Yeah.
however they do it.
I'll get the best they have, but I was surprised to hear they were magnets.
All right. Anything else? Anybody?
Well, I agree with you about not having that rope trim on the windows. And, yeah, I do like the depth of the brown one in the recess of
Yes,
the
ma'am.
panels. I think that dimension is important.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right.
Thank you all for
Chris,
what you do.
thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks. Item number 3, discussion of building alterations at 137 4th Avenue South, the Dan German Hospital. Lee Restoration. You don't look like Jenna Lee.
I am not Jenna Lee. Do I need to?
Go ahead and tell us your name, please.
My name is David Crothamel with Lee Restoration.
Was that Avid?
David?
David. I was like, Avid? Crothamel. Okay. All right. If you'll give us an overview, please.
Yeah, I didn't submit this, so I think we're missing a little bit of detail. This picture is from I guess, before we started any renovations. Oh, there we go. This is our new updated picture. What we did was we installed railing in between those two archways. And I hope that Gina put the other photo that we have from the 1920s, which shows that railing system as part of the build. I couldn't see it on the agenda email that I'd gotten, but there is a updated 1920s photo with that railing system. So what we did was we installed that, and we're, jumped the gun, so to speak, on installing that railing. We were given that detail from the owner of Williamson County, and we did install the railing before we got your approval. So we're here to ask for that, but then also on that 1920s picture, we have a railing on the roof as well that we were going to ask for the historic approval for that as well in this meeting.
Okay. Elizabeth, do you Do you have any of those old pictures?
We weren't able to find a historic photo of any railing on the porch itself, but we have seen the image of a small railing detail along the roof line in a historic image, but none within the porch itself. So if that is something that would have to be brought to the Historic Zoning Commission meeting. So just to follow up on that, staff requested that the applicants attend the design review committee after noticing that the railings had been installed. As it was not on previous COA applications or building permits, and a new handrail was installed between the arches of the front porch and leading up to the front porch. The guidelines recommend to avoid installing porch railings on porches where railings were not historically present unless required for safety or access reasons. Required railings should be simple and designed with square balusters. The installed railings do not align with the guidelines as there were no railings on the porch historically, and the railings leading up to the porch steps are not appropriate as previously a simpler design was present. The installed railings have not been reviewed for code compliance and must be verified as well. Thank you.
Okay. So let's talk about these two things. So we've got these white, I assume they're wooden rails that infill the arches, and then the other portion of this are the rails on each side of the step, which are grab rail, handrails. Let's talk about the ones between the arches there first. And it sounds like you're saying that there's a picture from the 20s and those in that format existed at that time. Okay. All right, so
Yes.
any comments on that, anybody?
Yeah,
Brian?
I'd like to see that photograph. And in your application to our voting meeting, if that's in our packet, that would be very helpful with that. Dr. Dan German, because it's a German hospital, Dan German Hospital, he had a penchant for these stone veneered buildings. So I'd be interesting to see, did it have, the kind of railings you're talking about?
Correct, yes. Yeah, I mean, I have the picture on my phone, but I don't have it available to you right this moment.
And you said something about a railing on the roof or the porch?
Yeah,
porch
so if you look right above those arches, there's actually a railing that goes all the way across that front and then back to the roof.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see it in that picture there. That picture on the right-hand side is the picture that I have, but it does also have a railing between the arches as well.
Yeah, with photographic evidence, I can support these elements.
Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else on this?
I would agree with Brian. I would love to see the photo. But I'm also, this is a commercial business,
Yes.
so I'm also wondering if there's some sort of code requirement
Right.
in regards to having railing there anyways.
We would actually pass code without railing because of the height.
Uh-huh.
We wouldn't have any safety issues with the height
Okay.
off the ground level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a photo would be great to see.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anything else on this particular portion there?
Yeah, well, I think if we could see a photo and if you're actually restoring what was there, I think that's really exciting. So to me, the railing that you guys put in doesn't seem like a historic railing, but if you have a photo and you're actually restoring it, I think it would be worth, reconsidering, obviously. I think it would be really a great addition to have how it was before.
Yeah, there are holes on the sides of where the old railing used to be. So if you were to go by the Dan German, you would actually see it. We raised it a little bit, but you can still see some of the hole marks that the railing sat on before.
And also with the addition of the hand railing on the front, off the front door. Yeah, exactly. Where did that design choice come from?
So right behind our sign right there, the Lee Restoration sign, there was a old rail that used to be there. You can see it right there.
Right.
And so for purposes to, for purposes of meeting, some sort of a handrail going up that stairway, that's what the county chose to put in. And then when we had the inspection, our inspector said, no, there has to be railings on both sides. So we mimicked the same thing on the opposite side.
Okay, so the county chose the design of the handrail?
Correct.
Got it, okay.
And I think and Jared's here too from BNS. I'm assuming that this height here doesn't require a guardrail, but might require a handrail. And we've got a guardrail with pickets when it could have just been a grab rail on a couple legs. Is that correct?
That's correct. From the way that it looks, it doesn't look like it requires that guardrail, but it does require those handrails.
Okay.
We've not got anything on plans for code compliance yet. Just wanted to mention that we haven't verified in the field or on plans if this is code, if it meets code.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the old railing in the older picture was a simple kind of pipe, came up, went across and down, just a handrail, not a guardrail to keep you from falling through. And now it's got pickets and keeps you from falling through. So it's a little denser than would be appropriate on this style of house that doesn't need it by code. And of course, Jared and his department will verify those code requirements. But if they can do it with a simple handrail instead of a whole guardrail, that would be more appropriate. Anybody thoughts on that?
I just have a question. I think that rail that was taken out doesn't look historic at all, though, and the one that they put in looks a lot better as a kind of a blending into a historic background. So does anyone have thoughts about that? It seems like it would be.
Yeah, I agree. The old one looks like galvanized pipe, and it was kind of looks a little homemade. Yeah, but the new one is too densely populated of members to look appropriate. It's just too much. I mean, that's why if you just need a handrail, it could just be a simple grab rail on two legs, like they had, but not a homemade version.
Tyler, may I ask a question?
Sure.
I know it came in a little bit late, but is this just in regards to the handrails or about the guards that are placed up on the?
We talked about that a bit in that there's the applicant is saying they have photographic evidence from the 20s that something similar to that existed, as well as a balustrade on top of that low roof. So they said that the height doesn't necessarily require, they don't think, again, you all can verify that 30-inch thing, but it might have to do with continuous path for your wheelchair access. I don't know, I'll let y'all deal with that. But I think what we heard from the commission was that that could be supported if you have photographic evidence, both pieces, the balustrade above and the rails between the arches. That's kind of where we were at on that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just going to see if staff could reiterate where we are on the guidelines as far as that rail leading up to the front porch.
It would recommend a very simple railing and design with square balusters,
With square balusters, okay. Thank you.
if required.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you're recommending wood square baluster, or could it be
Just square.
metal?
I don't believe it indicates which material it is recommended to be. So if there's a material that's been present there historically and they want to go back with that similar material, that would be appropriate.
is there anything in reference to color or,
No.
okay, thank you.
Can I clarify, balusters or posts? Do you want the handrail with posts, or do you want
Yeah,
handrail with balusters
Yeah,
and posts?
there's some synonymous terms when it comes to millwork and rails and things. Right now, the guardrail requirements, I think, if you had to have a guardrail on each side of the steps, would be met. It's that 4-inch ball, can't pass through it. From what I see, and hoping Jared's department can verify, you don't need that. There's nothing to fall off of. And so if that's the case, you'd need a post at the top, a post at the bottom, and a simple rail. And then they would help you with the continuation, that foot continuation, and all those things that come into play. But we don't need anything to keep you from falling 8 inches off into the bushes. It's
But
not-
to
yeah.
your point, I think what they're saying is the posts at the top and the posts at the bottom are the
Rectangular.
balusters.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're really, the main pieces are the newels, and the little pickets are the balusters, and you can find definitions of other ways to call it. But yes, something really simple, because it's a lot of pieces for the house, and especially with the addition of the porch, you've got sort of a dense wooden thing, and now you've got metal, and you've got metal on the ramp, which is where all this language came from. Keeping the front of the house looking as historic as possible, I don't know that, is it aluminum?
Cast iron, I think.
Those are cast
Steel.
iron across
Yeah,
the front? Okay,
steel.
it's good. But something very simple, just a grab rail on each side would be more appropriate.
It's, to me, such a pleasure to talk about these little intricacies because this house was proposed to be torn down and the Fourth Avenue parking garage put on that corner. So we're lucky it's standing.
Yeah. Anything else, anybody? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Okay. Item 4, discussion of window replacement at 223 Franklin Road, Hank Gardner. Mr. Gardner, welcome.
Hello, hello. I had actually a packet, or is that printouts from Rick Warwick.
You can pass it over here, and they'll
I just printed out five.
bring it
I
around.
apologize, I should have printed out more, but that was just the emails back and forth that I had with him.
Okay.
Trying to research pictures of our house. And then also had gone down to the Williams County Archives to go through all the pictures there and see if there was anything.
Okay.
But anyway, so where we're at, we had these windows replaced. It was a screw up on our end, obviously, but it was, we replaced like for like, except they had the clad on the exterior of it. And then got a stop work order, obviously. We got them put in and sealed up the property and came to the review committee, or not review committee, but came to, I guess, the DRC or DRZ, get them all mixed up, to get the approval on it. They approved the new addition, windows on it, but not the sides, asked for a little bit more information, dug a little bit more, and this is what we had found. But we replaced like for like as far as size and grid on the property, and we thought we were doing the right thing. Unfortunately, obviously, we found out later that we were not. So what this packet includes is a wood window instead of the clad window. So ripping out all the old window, or the new windows that we put in, and putting in wood windows. Basically what this proposal is. The other end of it is the front section were the windows that we know were in fact replaced back in probably the late 80s by the previous owner. And that was the same grid, so that was the same grid we put up. If the committee wants us to do a different 2 or 3 over 0, or I don't know all the terms on it, we're fine with that. We just need to get it ordered with the window company. So I just need to know what to do and where the best option is for us on this. Other things on this house that we've done, we preserved everything architectural-wise, not that you can't see it from the outside, but on the inside. All the hardwood floors stayed. The phone booth, bench, and box, and it stayed. The laundry, ironing board stayed. And those were actually all Farnsworth upgrades when he built properties in the area. Those were his little nuances that he put in that were the upgrades. And we kept all that in the property. So we thought we were doing the right thing, and we're all for preservation and doing it, and we love it. And we've done it before in New Orleans and here. born and raised here originally, so, but, so I just didn't know what to do.
So this document you handed out, some emails, it doesn't directly, or maybe I missed it, reference the pictures in the back. What's the picture
Okay,
in the back?
okay, so the last picture in the back, so the guy that took out the windows for us, my window guy, I said, did you keep any of those windows after we went back? And he was like, oh, yeah, I kept two of them. We're going to put them up in the chicken coop,
Okay.
replace the windows in the
So
chicken.
this
coop
is what
with
came out of the
sashes.
side.
So those were the sashes from the upstairs side window on the top.
Okay, understood.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
sorry, I
Just
should
get a little
explain that,
clarity
yeah.
there. All right, let's hear from staff on their analysis here, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and would like to thank the applicant for returning to discuss the replacement windows on the historic portion of the building at 223 Franklin Road. As a reminder, during the January Historic Zoning Commission meeting, the applicant was seeking a retroactive COA for the replacement of windows on the historic building and on the non-historic addition. The windows were approved on the non-historic addition as they met the guidelines for materials for an addition. However, the windows did not meet the recommendations for windows on a historic building as it was not an all-wood replacement window. The applicant has returned to discuss the design of an all-wood window and would like to discuss options for window light patterns for the windows on the historic building. The previously present windows on the historic front of the house featured a 2/2 light pattern. The windows on the side of the house featured a 6/6 light pattern. The applicant would like to discuss the light design options for the 4 windows at the front of the house that would be, and whether there would be an alternative design more appropriate for the age and style of the building. This is a circa 1930s bungalow cottage, and other bungalow-like homes in Franklin often feature multi-light over a single light window. Staff has been unable to find a historic photo of the windows present at the building, so either going back with what was existing and known would be appropriate, or if the commission would like to discuss a new or replacement window to have a historic profile and dimension of an alternative light pattern design if it is appropriate for a historic profile. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anybody want to jump in first here, Brian?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. Thanks for bringing this back to us. The 2/2 on the front is you find those on some Victorian homes, and this is not a Victorian home. So I would support the 6/6. That's what you have on most of the rest of the houses.
The whole
6/6. I think if these are the original windows, I mean, these are 6/6, and that's what I would say would be most appropriate for this bungalow cottage, maybe some Cape Cod kind of elements too, I don't know. But that's what you'd see on a house of this vintage as well. So I think that would work.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree that 6/6 would make sense and probably was what was there. And the ones on the front, the 2/2, I don't think there's any way that was the original look, but the person before you is the one that replaced it with that, is that right? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, we're fine with whatever the committee recommends on those ones facing Franklin Road. Honestly, my wife and I were talking, we were like, hey, we would like to do 3/0 at the bottom. We've seen that design around for a while. And we were back and forth on it, and I told her, I was like, I don't want to go back in front of the committee because I'm changing. I said, just put like for like in. Let's do it. That's what we did. So.
Anybody else comments
Yeah,
on it?
just with this photograph, just want to be clear that these are the sashes that came off of the house that were taken, and they're
Yeah.
original.
Yes, those are from the side. If you're looking, if you go to the next picture, those were from that window up there at the top.
Okay? All right, I think you have good evidence.
One other comment I had too was on these front windows, if you look at the old street view, and a lot of historic houses and a lot of jurisdictions require that there be a space mole between the two when you have pairs. The new windows, you can tell from like the street view before they were replaced that there's 3.5, 4 inches between the windows with a piece of trim over it. And when they replaced it, they made both windows a little bit wider and just gobbled that up. So there's not actually a space mole there. I don't know if staff can pull up the old street view or not, but it'd be good when they put new windows in, if they include that 3.5, 4 inch space mole. And most window companies have they'll sell it to you in the pair with the space, because
Okay.
everywhere they do historic work, they have to include it.
So is that, do we have an old picture?
Yeah, see that
Gotcha.
chunk between the windows?
Yep.
That's important. It's important.
Okay.
And it doesn't appear now in the new one, and I think it will
Gotcha.
make it look more appropriate.
You're right.
And the guidelines, I don't even remember if our guidelines say it or not, but a lot of other jurisdictions require it. It's in Nashville, it's on the permit.
Okay, so going
all
six,
windows.
okay, so going 6/6, but then also including that,
That's
it's what,
that-
like a 3-inch?
3-inch space mole. That's probably the smallest it would want to be. And this house isn't a real broad house.
No.
So you don't want to get up to like a 6-inch space mole. It will eat up too much window. But looking at that, it's probably about a 3.5, and that
Okay.
would make it look more correct. But that's my only thought there.
Mr.
Can I,
Ch-
go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I agree with what you were saying, that what's installed currently, it looks clearly newly installed. It doesn't feel like it fits the house. But I also wanted to get the feedback of the board on, in my opinion, 6/6 is more of a side and rear application, and I'd be open to it here, but I also would be open to 6/1 if it's an option.
We're fine with that because we like to look out on the sidewalk.
Well, and to staff's point, that would fit the bungalow style for this period of home. So I'm curious what y'all think.
Yeah, the 6/1 isn't uncommon necessarily. There's a lot of houses that are maybe a little older than this one, where the front windows would have been 1/1 and the sides would have been divided light. That was your expensive windows were in the front, and big pieces of glass were carried by horses and on a boat. So you didn't make it far with big pieces of glass. But this vintage of house was a little later than that. So oftentimes they did match all the way across, or kind of emulated that old world thing where they had some bigger pieces on the front. So I don't know what to think on this particular one, because we don't have a picture. I
I'm
know
not
that.
totally against 6/6. I just feel like it feels like a side and rear window.
Yeah.
And I would personally prefer to see the 6/1 in this application for the front.
When you say one, that means
Just
the
one big
bottom.
piece of glass.
Just one piece, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. Yeah, I don't have a big preference. I mean, I have in my mind some aesthetic things, but that's not my purview.
Yeah.
I think-
I had seen, 6/1 in Franklin. But what I'd like to see is kind of what was in that neighborhood. What did they actually do at Miles Manor Court? The house directly to the side of it, across the street, that has 6/6 in the front.
Yeah, Paul's does.
and
Okay.
around the sides. But if you could bring us examples, in that neighborhood where they had 6/6 on the side and then 6/1 on the front, I think that would be.
Yeah, be
give us
telling.
something we could.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's
That's a good
probably 6/6 on the majority of them if you go through
Yeah.
the side. on it.
And even, the other thing when we look at these old houses is sometimes if the front windows are a different size, like a dramatically different size, you'll start to see some different patterning than the sides. But the side windows and the front windows look, and of course, we're not there with a tape measure, but they're about the same size, right? And so oftentimes they're ordering and getting, hey, we're building 8 of these houses right now, similar, and we bought 60 windows, the same window, and we put them in here. And in that vintage of house, a lot of those were done that way.
Yeah.
So, but bring some evidence. This isn't the voting meeting, so we're not really
No, I know,
approving
yeah.
anything. But when
I
you
figured
come
that
to
out.
get approval, bring some pictures and what you want to do. Okay, because part of this is your preference too. It's like, well, if we decided we really want 6/1, show us the evidence for that. or lack thereof and
If
go.
anything, we would
don't have it."
probably like 3/1.
Yeah, that's more of like a prairie style thing. And I don't think that necessarily goes with this.
Then I won't presume.
Yeah,
I won't
yeah.
do it.
I mean, everybody can speak up, but that literally, most brands call that the prairie light pattern. So, and this isn't a prairie house. But bring your ask and then bring some neighborhood evidence, and then we'll discuss it and vote on your proposal, what you
Okay.
want to do.
And that is really our goal. I mean, our goal is to look at a neighborhood and look at what's historically appropriate for that neighborhood and make decisions like that, which is really more than what we like or we don't like. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So, like Tyler said, if you can get us that evidence, I mean, that's what we need.
Yeah. One other question. As far as the clad and all wood windows, how far does that go? Because we've already put these in and, I mean, I can do the wood in the front. I can do the wood all over if I have to. It's just going to be a hard pill to swallow. Is there any way we could do the clad going down the side and then do the front with the all wood? They look the exact same way. If you walked up 5 feet from it, you still couldn't tell.
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems,
Yeah, the guidelines, I mean, we really have to lean on our guidelines at that point and just say, it says the old part of the house needs to be wood windows. It talks about composite or wood around additions, is that correct? Which is what you have. That composite window is what an aluminum clad window is. It's two materials made into one
well,
unit.
yeah, it's an all wood window,
Yeah.
but the exterior of it has that new.
Yeah, it's just wrapped in aluminum. Yeah.
What, I don't even think it's aluminum, it's a.
Yeah, it could be
fibrous, yeah.
fiberglass or whatever, yeah. So those, I don't think staff is saying those are inappropriate on the addition. Those were approved.
Right, those were
Those you're
approved,
good.
correct.
So this front part of the house, our guidelines say they ought to be all wood, and that's,
And there's no variance wise, as far as maintenance goes and the style of material or
we've heard
anything?
those arguments before, but we've always said that we stick to the guidelines, but if anybody else has opinions on that. I get the argument totally, because I've been there. I do this every day, and I put aluminum clad wood windows in bunch of old houses.
Yep.
But here in Franklin, the community, voted for these guidelines, and the guidelines say that they're supposed to be all wood. So that's where I kind of lean on. But these clad windows some brands get the profiles and things right. There's a little sheen difference on the finish, but you could faux that with
I mean,
really
it's-
good paint on wood.
It's paintable
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's just.
so I get it, all the maintenance, you'll never have to touch them in your lifetime
Oh,
if
no,
they
we'll have
weren't
to paint.
wood, right? But it's just not what our guidelines recommend. So I'm open to hear anybody else's argument, but in the past, we've held to that standard of our guidelines.
And I would just recommend if you're shopping around for the wooden window, that you find a good wood that is going to last and not rot out in several years. And, they make good materials like that.
Yeah, I put the specs in that packet, and that's what, I was just waiting to figure out the grids that we wanted to before I ordered more windows.
And like when you say grids, that they'll be true divided light, right?
What do you mean? I'm not,
Well, rather than having a snap-on grill on the inside that makes it look like 6/6, it would be true divided light.
Like
Or simulated
six
Panes.
individual pieces of glass versus one
I
big
don't think
piece.
so. I think it's whatever's on there. I don't know the terms.
Yeah, those are simulated divided light. SDL right there.
Which our guidelines do, Mr. Chair, they do recommend if it's either a true divided light or SDL.
Yeah, the
Either is
guidelines-
okay.
The guidelines allow the SDL.
Great.
They don't allow the grill between the glass, GBGs,
Right.
which is the glass, and there's just bars
Yeah,
in
no, it's
there.
not that.
Yeah, GBGs aren't allowed. SDLs are allowed within our guidelines.
Here, I have a question for, I guess, staff, but, so, I'm interested to hear about, why the clad window isn't considered a wood window. Like typically a cheaper window you would not use because it wouldn't look old or anything, but as far as I understand, a wood window that's clad on the outside is more of a authentic wood window that's just more weatherproof. It sounds like that's not what the or what the commission considers to be a full wood window.
No, they call that the composite window within our guidelines. And yeah, you've had the same comment I've had for several years, which is, ought we allow something like that? And right now, the guidelines don't read that way, but it doesn't mean they won't in the future. It's just not what was in the guidelines. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into it. We have to defend the guidelines and windows. And I do think there is a difference where the meeting rails come together. There are so many things that are different about clad windows and real wooden windows. And on historic structures, we should maintain the integrity of them.
I
Now,
agree.
additions are different.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
On the clad windows a lot, you start after a few years seeing little seams.
Yeah, and some different brands build them differently, so there's a little less control there, but people that build wood windows differently too. So I think the idea was that in our historic districts, we're using and maintaining historic materials and historic formats of using those materials. And so a wood window speaks to that, where we require wood siding, things like that on the front, but in addition could maybe be hardy, things like that. So not necessarily specific to your project, but the all-wood window, I think our guidelines say that the simulated divided light would be okay. And if you want to bring the evidence of the 6/6 or 6/1, please do that. We'll look at that.
So do you think the board or the committee later on, the 6/6 is acceptable? Because I'd like to present something that's solid that I can move forward with instead of going into May, June, July, and
Sure,
August to
sure.
get the house painted. So,
I think you've heard.
I'd like to get-
Yeah, you've heard favorable
Okay.
feedback on the 6/6. I think there's, like I said, there's some aesthetic things that maybe a 6/1, maybe just a preference of yours, or that it could make the house look more unique or something. Bring it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but to what I was saying, I really just wanted to hear y'all's opinion on one versus the other, but I'm not opposed to 6/6. I think it would be great. More information is better always. So if there's some houses in the neighborhood, you can bring photos of the 6/6. I mean, that's great. But I think you're okay either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're headed down the right path, and we appreciate your willingness to kind of work on this and get it right.
It's not an option, so.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh, my wife wanted to ask, if she put up window boxes, do I got to get that approved?
I don't think so. Those are not permanent.
As long as they're not permanent, so, or like they're affixed and removable, so easily removable.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I don't want window boxes.
Talk about maintenance. All right. Item number 5, discussion of building alterations at 121 Miles Manor Court. Scott Cash, applicant. Got the whole Cash crew.
We heard you missed us, so.
I know. Okay, we've obviously had many conversations. If you want to tell us what's new, it seems like you've given us a lot of new information and done a bunch of research. So if you want to walk us through what's new, that's super helpful. Thank
I'd
you.
love to. Is it okay for me to just read this letter?
You can do whatever you want, as long as you're mindful of everybody's time.
Yes, sir.
All
All right.
theirs included.
Great. Okay. I'll skip the first paragraph and I'll just say, we're submitting this packet as part of our request for a change in the approved roofing material on our rear section of the roof. as well as a retroactive certificate of appropriateness for the cedar shake roofing currently installed on our home based on new information. We are seeking a COA for the EPDM roofing installed on a high rear section of the home. This portion is not visible from the street and was a matter of necessity for preserving the integrity of the structure due to the low slope of the roof in that area. The EPDM is a mild black designed to blend in with surrounding materials. Satellite imagery and ground level photographs are included to document the location of the EPDM roofing relative to the rest of the home and street. I believe we have that somewhere there. Additionally, over the past several months, we've taken seriously the task of gathering as much historical evidence as possible regarding the likelihood that cedar shakes existed on our home earlier in its history. We have spent considerable time researching, speaking with local experts, reviewing historic aerial photography, and consulting archival materials. The materials in this packet represent the results of that effort. While no clear photograph of the house prior to 1950 has been located, the materials we have assembled, including aerial imagery, professional roofing assessments, historical roofing research, recollections from prior ownership, and archival review, collectively indicate that cedar shakes were very likely installed in the home during its construction in 1930 or at some point shortly thereafter, before later being replaced with asphalt shingles. We recognize that historic determinations often rely on the best available evidence rather than perfect documentation. For that reason, we've attempted to present a broad set of materials, professional opinions, historical context, photographic analysis, and neighborhood comparisons, so the Commission can evaluate the question from multiple angles. Importantly, our request is not simply about a roofing material. It's about ensuring that the home continues to reflect the architectural character and historic traditions of Franklin. Cedar shakes were commonly used in this region during the era in which the home was built, and homes within the historic overlay continue to use them today, along with products specifically designed to emulate them. In that sense, the current roof is consistent both with the history of the home and with the broader historic character of the district. For these reasons, approving this current cedar shake roof would not introduce a new or incompatible material, but would allow the home to reflect its own history, as well as a roofing tradition that was common during the period in which it was built and that continues to exist on a number of homes within Franklin's historic overlay. So we have spent about, between the two of us, no lie, 200 hours on this. Since December 8th, we have gone on a deep, deep dive to kind of learn all that we can about our home and its history, and then also just to go investigate evidence from all over that we could. So do you want to? Can we talk about the EPDM?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, start with that. Yep.
And so from that, our contractor told us when we were putting a roof on the house, and I'm just going by his recommendation, he said we have to do this because of the slope of the roof. I think it's a 312 back there, and maybe even for some reason when they finished it, I think I reached out but haven't heard back yet. So
It says on the plans.
it's 312 on the plans, and it might be even, less of a slope than that at this point. I don't know for sure, but we're just going by. They said, hey, this is what we need to do, and we are as ignorant as they come about. I had never heard of EPDM until then, so that's there, and you cannot see it from the road, as you can see. So we just wanted to talk through that, and
Okay.
it was similar to what happened before. We didn't know that we needed to get approval for that part of that roof. So wanted to bring it to you guys because we recognized it is there, and we want to acknowledge that.
Okay. Let's talk about your cedar shake roofing, and if you want to talk through just kind of an overview of.
Yeah, it would
Where
be
you
okay. I was just going to quickly read the summary of each finding. I'll do it. It's
Yeah.
only a couple sentences
Okay.
each. Is that okay?
Yeah,
And then
perfect.
You guys can ask questions.
Perfect, thank you.
This first picture is a 1950 aerial photograph of the neighborhood. Shows the roof of the subject property appearing noticeably lighter in tone than the surrounding roofs. In aerial photography from this period, asphalt shingles typically appear darker due to their tar and mineral composition, while weathered cedar shake roofs often appear lighter due to reflectivity and weathering. These photographs frequently show steeply pitched residential roofs with textures consistent with wood shingles. The tonal contrast between the subject property and nearby roofs suggests that a different roofing material was present on the home at that time. And we had second, the roofing professional who also looked at these photographs and agreed. And these two experienced roofing professionals independently reviewed the available information and characteristics of the home. Both concluded that cedar shakes would be consistent with the architectural period of the house and that the available evidence suggests shakes were installed on the home at some point in history. Third, historical research indicates that cedar shake roofing was commonly used in the residential structures in Middle Tennessee during the 30s and 40s, the period immediately following the construction of the home. This supports the assertion that cedar was an appropriate and widely used roofing material for houses of this era. Fourth, a letter from a previous owner of the property recalls that the owner from whom he purchased the home remembered the house having a cedar roof earlier in its history. This recollection aligns with the other evidence suggesting cedar roofing was very likely present. Fifth, archival research was conducted through the Williamson County Archives and through every single one of Rick Warwick's collection of more than 22,000 historic photographs of Franklin and Williamson County. No legible photographs of the home prior to 1950 were located. While this absence does not confirm the roofing material used, it also revealed no evidence contradicting the possibility that cedar shakes were previously installed. Sixth, research into the architectural shingles, particularly luxury designer shingles currently being approved and installed on many homes of various architectural styles within the historic overlays shows that these products were developed to mimic the natural beauty of wooden shakes and slate. The included literature outlines the history and purpose of these shingles, also known as dimensional, laminated, or composite shingles, and demonstrates that they were specifically designed to emulate the material that is currently installed on the roof of the home. And finally, cedar shake roofs are currently present in a number of homes within the Franklin's historic overlay, demonstrating that cedar has historically been used within the district and continues to be recognized roofing material on historic properties.
Okay, let's hear from staff, get their feedback, and then we'll circle back to the EPDM to start, okay? Go ahead.
Thank you. So this is considered a new application as this is considering two roofing materials, the EPDM on the rear section of the building on a low slope roof and the cedar shake roofing material based on new information and research after the material was previously denied. The EPDM is appropriate in the proposed location to assist with the requirements for slopes at a low pitch and materials required for that. The roofing section has an extremely limited visibility from the rear of the building and will have a minimal impact. The applicant has also compiled research and new information since the December Historic Zoning Commission meeting for the request for cedar shingle roofing. The detailed application package includes a narrative, table of contents, additional new information, includes a signed letter from the previous owner stating that they recall cedar shingle roofing being on the building per discussions with the previous owner before the 1990s. There are two independent analyses of the interior of the roof that indicate that cedar shake may have been a material present on the building based on the nail patterns completed by two separate roofing companies. Historic photos of the buildings in the city and county that had wood shingle roofing, current roofs with wood shingle roofs in the historic district, and images of the building with the same architectural style with cedar shingle roofing, and an analysis and narrative about architectural shingles. The use of cedar shake roofing may be appropriate if it was a material historically present based on a signed letter by a previous owner and the analysis by two different roofing companies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Mary, did you have something?
I did want to say something.
Okay.
When the shake roof first came forward, I did talk to Cheryl Wilson, whose family lived there, and have very conflicting information to what Ed Underwood said. She said, as to her memory, it was always a asphalt shingle roof. So I just want that read into the record. I think to bring information like that forward with no more verification than that and take it as a finding is a hard thing for me to think we should do. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's talk about the EPDM roof here. If you'll pull up, well, you can sort of see what view you have of it from the road. Any comments on that? Anybody has? No?
8 seems appropriate.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, a 312, I think you can do a lot with a 312, but it may be less than that. So
Well,
that'll,
and you can't see it from anywhere that you would be
Yeah,
looking.
totally not visible. Okay. So I think that, that would be appropriate and necessary there, and especially on a cedar shake roof, it's even more susceptible to to low slope issues than asphalt shingles. So, okay, let's go to the Cedar Shake roofing. Any other kind of feedback for them on this in light of the documentation they brought? And I don't know if you all had a chance to review it all, but there's a lot.
I have a couple of
lot there.
things.
Okay.
So, didn't we see a photo previously at a separate meeting where it had the asphalt shingles? Isn't that right?
There are probably submission photos from our previous
the original submission?
applications where it had, before the renovation maybe even started. And
So
somewhere
the-
midway through, it was changed to this.
And then, okay, I thought I had seen that. The other thing is, I just wanted to point out is Franklin is full of different architectural styles over the course of different decades. And just because one house has cedar roofing doesn't mean this one did or that it fits this style of house. And we've seen a photo of it with the asphalt shingles, and these other photos are unclear whether it's cedar or not cedar. So that's kind of that's my point of view.
Yeah. Okay. Bob, you have anything?
I read all the material, and I still didn't find anything that was, I found just fact-based in there being a previous cedar shake roof on this house.
Okay. Angela, anything you want to add? No? Okay. Holly, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so I was here before when you guys came to the DRC. I wasn't here at the voting meeting. It's my daughter's birthday. But I guess I think it's historically, cedar shake roofs are all over the place. So I don't think there's any question at all that they exist in Franklin and that it could have been that at some point. So I guess for me, if you're deciding between asphalt and cedar, say in the first place, cedar would be a much higher end material than asphalt. Like as far as I understand, asphalt is more of a cheap way to do slate. Like it was more like an advance in technology, not like a quality high end roofing material. So I think historically, the shake roof that you have on there is a much higher quality version of your house that may have been there at some point or may not have. But I can't quite imagine why it'd be real important to downgrade it to something that it probably was most of its life, rather than what it could have been if they'd maybe had the budget for it in the first place, or maybe they did have the budget for it. But to me, I think that it's absolutely there in this style of house and in the area. And so whether it was or wasn't sometime between when it was built in 1950, when we've seen pictures, to me doesn't seem important enough to say that you can't use it, because I think it very well may have. And to me, it looks like in one of those pictures, it did look lighter than in the asphalt ones that were more dark. So I guess if the material were not really appropriate, but may have been on there, I could see the saying, well, we need direct proof because it's not appropriate anyway, unless it was there. But this, I think, is appropriate regardless of whether it actually was on this exact house. So I don't see why it is a huge deal. I mean, I think that it's right. I think it's a correct option. So I think that it's fine and it's absolutely beautiful and that it's an upgrade. I do understand that maybe there isn't proof whether it was ever or not, and so I understand the discussion. I just don't think that taking it off and making the house less quality than it is makes it more historic.
Okay.
So, out of curiosity, I mean, that is a picture, and I will give you my word, we did not doctor a single photograph.
Yeah.
We have handled this, it has been very important to us to handle this with the utmost integrity. I give you my word. And, that's definitely a lighter colored material in that home compared to the surrounding ones. The house, just to make sure about it, the house was built in 1930. There was some discrepancy about that. I've gone on to a deep dive to make sure it was built in 1930, which predated some of the houses around it. And so, and then also, you know, we do have that letter from this roofer who went into the attic, looked at the old part of the attic, said, hey, these nail patterns are indicative of something, of the cedar roof, is what he had said. And again, like, we have been very clear with everyone, we are going to do this with integrity. And so with that, and then the other roofer, who is an expert, acknowledging, hey, the lighter color of that aerial photograph, having been someone who's looked at tons of these aerial photographs, you know, I'm just trying to, also, I went to the Williamson County Archives, spoke with a really kind woman there, I can't remember her name, for a long time, and she said there's a massive gap in the historic record in Franklin on homes like this. She said, hey, if you lived in Jasmine Grove, which is next to us, or some of the more beautiful, recognizable homes in Franklin, there are pictures of those from the early 1900s. She said, I'm not trying to insult your home, but it just wasn't important. And she said, and there wasn't an important person who lived there. She said, so we just don't have street view photographs of any homes like that during these decades, you know. So there's a real absence of data there. So I think I would love to understand, based on the guidelines that say, I just want to pull that up real quick. So I have them right here. So the guidelines say preserve historic forms and materials. It doesn't say preserve current forms and materials. And what was current was asphalt prior to us, you know, putting the cedar shake on. But it was even, and you talked about this last time, you know, the current asphalt shingles, they're architectural shingles. They're not 3-tab shingles. What would have been historic back to, if we really were going back, 3-tab shingles would be what all the homes would have. And then I spent a lot of time researching CertainTeed and some of these other roofing brands. And if you look on any of their websites, they will say that modern architectural shingles they say they are designed to emulate cedar shakes and slate. And so, you know, these modern products that we're using that we're not, that
Is saying that the material is inappropriate or unattractive or any of those things. I think it's just that our guidelines do ask us to maintain existing elements of the building. Whether that's the existing windows, we tell people they can't replace those, to fix them, right? Which you've done some of. In all the building elements on the outside, and the roofing is just one of them. I mean, I've been sort of torn on this one. I mean, am I thrilled that this was done without kind of the process and procedures? No, nobody is, right?
absolutely my fault.
But I agree with Holly in some regards that this is a nicer material. And it is in our guidelines that this material is acceptable, except when there's something there, you're just supposed to maintain what's there, right? I think the most compelling piece of evidence is the nail hole pattern, but I'm not an expert on nail hole patterns, but I know both of these roofing companies. I don't know them, but I know they're reputable. Like, they do lots of work and they've been around a long time. So I'm like, okay, well, that says something to me. That's the most compelling piece, but it's not proof, as Bob would say. You know, we don't have any smoking gun here going up. We pulled this off and there's cedar shake all over it. We can just look at it. You know, so I'm, you know, the picture with the different color, did they have lighter colored roofs back then? Maybe. I don't know. That's a more kind of conjecture to me. I'm like, it could be. It's definitely lighter in the picture. I'm not going to debate that.
In my research, the variance in asphalt shingles that we see today did not.
It's probably grays and blacks and dark browns. That was probably the extent of it. But I don't think the cedar shake on this house is inappropriate. We're just in a place where we're stuck where our guidelines would have told you to leave it. And it'd be so much easier for us if this were like, you know, highlighter orange, and we could just go, well,
Yeah.
nobody thinks this is a good idea. But this is a nice roof, so I'm sort of torn on it. I'm like, well, what do? We tell you to take it off and go to a cheaper material? It's like, well, I wouldn't be thrilled with that, and I don't think it is, does it set a bad precedent where people might just go, I'm just gonna put a cedar shake roof on my house and come ask for forgiveness because they did it? It's like, well, that's not fair. Or do we say, well, we'd rather have the nicer material and, it's not inappropriate for this house, this style of house, this part of the neighborhood, and let you do it? It's like, I can make arguments for both sides. And at the end of the day, the guidelines tell us we're supposed to leave them, and that's our kind of only defensible place we can sit, right? Because that's the community has charged us with upholding the guidelines, right? So it's like, well,
Well, I think
what
we
do we
were
do?
hoping that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Go ahead,
you. I
go
thought
ahead.
you were done.
You can
I think
go.
we were hoping that we were presenting enough evidence so that you would feel comfortable telling those people they had evidence, that we had gone to the professionals and.
We believe this
So-
house had a cedar roof.
So-
And
Yeah.
so, and just to clarify something with the guidelines, because I read them, most of them. There's language about maintaining, and there's also language about preserving historic forms.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, they're talking about forms, they're not talking about material forms, they're talking about
well,
like
it
the
says
shapes of the
it says
buildings.
preserve historic forms and materials.
Yeah.
Roof forms and materials. And so, if this is a historic material, then, yeah, it's,
Yeah, it's I think the intent of the guidelines is that kind of, if you have it now, you keep it the way it is, repair things. Those guidelines and that language, and staff can maybe speak to this, is really intended that people aren't wholesale changing out and throwing things away and putting new, even if it's in kind. The first attempt should be to repair and maintain what people have in the format that it is.
okay, so people remodeling homes, if they want to return it to a previous rendition of itself, is that?
We don't allow that unless there's some photographic evidence. We go, well, this kind of shows how it changed over time, and it's a snapshot of history here. And that there's varying degrees there, from totally 100%, authentic, everything original, to not much left but a little bit. And
Well,
everybody lives in that gradient. Go ahead, Mary, you've been waiting. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I want to say in my mind is where I am very torn, is we have made other homeowners show the proof that the shake roof was there, or they were not allowed to do a shake roof. And that, to me, coupled with our guidelines saying to do that, is where the rub is. It's not, I don't think it's our job to decide if something is a higher end material or not, anything like that, but we have been making the burden of proof be there.
Yeah, we've always required the smoking gun.
Mr.
Right.
Chair.
And I
So
think,
that
I
makes
think,
it
yeah,
hard.
but I do think it is, we do try to pass some type of judgment on high-quality materials or not, which is why we say things like real wood windows and things. Right,
Yes,
right.
because
So-
when you say
Hang on
real
one second.
wood, that is high quality,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So it's, we do a little of that. I don't want to say we don't do any of that. Go ahead, Madeline, you've been.
Well, I just had I had a thought, because, I agree with you that really the most compelling evidence is the letters from the roofing companies. And so,
With who are, have a vested interest in selling you a new roof.
Yes, they do.
So if
Yes,
they'll tell
they
you,
do.
no, that you should keep this one, I'm like, man.
right. But, we can't compare this house to other houses because architecture has changed over, like, each house in the area is different based on the period it was built in. That's the beauty of it. And our guidelines are what we have to lean back on. The photos that we're seeing, it's guesswork, and there really isn't a smoking gun. So my thought was, with these letters, if they could come in, if the people that wrote the letter could come in to discuss it, that could be helpful too.
Could be. Brian, what do you?
Yeah, just kind of to add into the conversation, I mean, there is circumstantial evidence that we can say is not conclusive. I mean, we see that in the photograph. Shadows can always change colors in aerial views. So then I go back to, you know, what could have been at the time. We know in the 1920s and 30s, there's ads all over the review appeal for Cedar Shake. So we don't, it's definitely possible. So then I have to ask, is there a reasonable doubt? Is there reasonable doubt that the house may have had a cedar shake roof? I mean, I think there's reasonable doubt, given what the roofers said and what we know is available, which would make me lean to saying, keep the cedar roof. And in the voting meeting, you know, that's how I went with it in the voting meeting. Because but with the more evidence that you've presented, I think it does present enough reasonable doubt for me to say, keep it.
Okay. Anybody else?
I do just want to respond to these roofing companies having, I understand you're saying a vested interest, but we've also made it clear, like, you know, this is over a six-figure roof, and we're not sure we can afford to finish this house and replace this roof. So they know that there was no, like, hey, if you write this for us, you'll put a new roof on for us, because
Yeah.
that's not where we are
Yeah.
financially.
Well, they wrote the
at
opposite.
all. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be.
Yeah, and we always tell people, like, we can't consider the financial part of any of this, because it's just,
Totally
people are in
understand.
different places, and
Understand.
you get that. But I think Holly did kind of delineate it well, that it's like, well, to take off a really high-quality roof, which can be found, and it's appropriate, it's all the things, it's just that the guidelines would have said, keep what you got. That's really what this hangs on. And, there is some reasonable doubt with some of this stuff. There was some for me before. And, I don't want you to have to take this roof off. I think it does look great, and I think it is appropriate. But I also have the charge of holding these guidelines, right? So it's like, but if everything went by the guidelines, everything, then there'd be no board. You'd just be like, if it's in the book, you can do it. If it's not, you can't. So we have to find ourselves in the gray areas where it's like, well, this has been done. We don't love being in this position, but we're going to have to deal with this one way or the other. So, I think you've heard some mixed feedback here from folks. And of course, it's not a voting meeting, so we're not going to take a vote. We're not going to take a tally. I'd recommend you get their feedback. They'll do a recap for you, and go back and listen, and just be ready to present this at a voting meeting, and see where the kind of debate and the votes lie at that point. But I appreciate, we can tell you've put an incredible amount of thought and energy into this, because all this doesn't happen without putting time on it. And so thank you for that. These things are helpful. Like I said, sometimes there is no smoking gun, and
Yeah,
that's okay.
Our hope was in the absence of a smoking gun, in the absence of a silver bullet. We just said, hey, let's go see if there are a bunch of muskets. And we believe it had a cedar roof based on all of the combination of this evidence, even though I can't, show you a street view photo from 1932 that has it, we did our very best to investigate all of it. And she looked through 22,000 photos twice and would call me, and we learned so much about this amazing city throughout this
Yeah.
process. It's incredible, so.
Okay, well, thank you all so much, and
guys.
appreciate it. Thank you.
See you next month.
All right, everybody. Item number 6, discussion of demolition and addition and alterations at 1309 Adams Street. Ben McCreary is applicant.
Hello, Ben McCrary, Chisel Workshop. So we are coming back with this project with some modifications based on our conversations from the last DRC. At this point now, we have talked about, we're doing a full demolition of the project with the intent to rebuild at the same footprint with the proposed addition to the back that we have shown here in these plans. The demolition is based on the fact that there is a significant structural deterioration of the project that we have cataloged. We have an engineer that has evaluated it and also determined that it is not really possible to salvage some of it. Really, the foundation structure has just been destroyed by termites and things like that over time. So what our intention is to, because we see the significance of this project in the historic Adams Street District, we are proposing to take it down, but rebuild it in the same footprint, return it back to its historic appearance, where this current state of it, the front porch has been infilled. We're going to bring it back to that historic front porch. We're even going to try to salvage some of the foundation stone material and use that as veneer on the new CMU code-compliant foundation to kind of make this project look as much of the memory of the original part as there. And then with the addition, of course, we make that look different so that, we're still maintaining that differentiation between what was historic and what was not. So really, that's the documentation that's in there now, really supports that more. And then we've got updated plans that show what the back is going to look like and the sides and things like that. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that or give you more information after you hear staff's comments.
Okay. Thank you. Staff?
Thank you. And we'd like to thank the applicant for returning to another DRC. The request has been changed from a previous discussion of partial demolition to full demolition of the principal building and reconstruction of the building with some additions and alterations to the building. This is a historic and contributing building to the Adams Street National Register Historic District. While information has been provided about elements of the building that need repair or replacement, a detailed report has not been submitted within this application that is required for a proposal of demolition based on structural instability or deterioration, and is needed with additional information, including reasons why rehabilitation is not feasible, the entirety of the building's physical condition, and any possible cost estimates for repair versus demolition and reconstruction. If possible, if that is possible, since it has been previously noted that the necessary replacement and foundation work may not meet the requirements for repair and rehabilitation and would still be considered full demolition. This is, once again, a historic and contributing building, so this means that the guidelines require that the Historic Zoning Commission finds that at least one of the criteria for demolition be met. The considerations are as follow: if a building has lost its architectural and historic integrity, and if its removal will not adversely affect the district's historic character. Loss of integrity must be substantiated with photographic documentation and a physical description of the property and address relevant issues. If the denial of the demolition will result in unreasonable economic hardship on the applicant as determined by the Historic Zoning Commission based on items outlined in the guidelines, and if the structural instability or deterioration of the property is demonstrated through a report by a structural engineer or architect with a demonstrated experience working with historic structures. Such a report must clearly detail the property's physical condition, reason why rehabilitation is not feasible, and cost estimates for rehabilitation versus demolition and construction of a comparable structure. In addition to this report, there should be a separate report that details future action on the site. For reconstruction, in special cases where the replication of a significant historic building is desired on its original site, only those clearly documented through plans, photographic evidence, or other documentation may be considered. In these cases, historic markers or other signage should display the historical significance of the site and building. The existing building heights, dimensions, roof slopes, overhangs, openings, and all details must be carefully detailed and submitted alongside the proposed reconstruction to verify that it is, in fact, reconstruction. Alterations or differences between what is existing and what is proposed to be reconstructed should be clearly called out. The proposed reconstruction proposes to shift the building location 2 feet to the left. Information is needed to better understand why the building is proposed to be moved, as the orientation and placement of the building should be preserved. Changes have been made to the rear of the building based on feedback for the addition that better align with the guidelines. The side entrance porch, however, is still protruding past the main form of the principal building and will be visible. And based on previous feedback during the DRC meetings, it was noted that the commission felt the application of the historic residential guidelines should still be applied to the then partial demolition, and staff would like feedback whether these guidelines are still preferred to maintain a high standard for reconstruction of the historic building. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody want to start off some comments here? We have seen this before a couple times, or several times over the years, this particular property.
I'd like,
Bob?
I'd like for you to discuss why you wanting to move it 2 feet.
Sure. So really that comes down to just modern requirements for driveways and things like that. Plus, it centers the property or the house in the property at that point. It's really kind of more, it's minimal, but really we were trying to maintain separation between the house and the drive, and then the drive and the property line off to the side of the adjacent. So really in order to kind of maintain that 5-foot easement or, kind of setback between any hardscape and the adjacent property, and then just not crowd the new driveway against the house. And you can see that on the SP 100 sheet that kind of explains, I'm trying to get a 7-foot setback to keep the driveway off the neighbor's property, and then a 12-foot drive, and then trying to maintain, roughly 8 or 9 feet between the drive and the house, just to keep it more. And there's nothing there's really no driveway now. There's no precedent for that. It's just kind of a dirt path and a little bit of gravel right now, so, thanks.
Anything else, Bob?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody on this side or this side? Yeah, the shift of the house, in my mind, is not ideal. I mean, part of, when we talk about context in a street, kind of a streetscape, the spacing of the houses that have been traditionally there is important in terms of that rhythm or lack thereof. And I'm ignorant to what setbacks are required in terms of driveways and things around here, but I'd be surprised if the driveway had to be 7 feet from the property line.
It's 5.
It's 5, yeah. So it's like, and then, you've got a pretty generous planter between the house, so I'd love to see it stay where it is out of respect for kind of the historic spacing. And really, it's more, to me, it has nothing to do with property lines. It has to do with distance from this house, each edge, to the house to the right and the house to the left, which has been there for, let's say, 100 years or some close number to that. I just think that's probably more important than having 2 more feet of buffer planting or 9 feet of planter between and the guest parking spot and all these things. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. I've seen plenty of historic properties in Franklin. The drive was right on the line
Oh, yeah,
almost.
sure.
I mean, maybe a few feet, that was it.
Yeah.
But, and as far as, and we may not be on it yet, but the demolition part, it's been brought to us before, once or twice, for the demolition of the house. So I can't really make comments on that till I've seen the engineer's report, what has changed. Does the engineer have experience with historic properties? I mean, there's a lot to it
Sure.
before I could even make any kind of a judgment on that.
I'm also noticing, I see in the original photos, it looks like it was on the left elevation, there was a random 6/6. Is that 6/6 or 4/4?
4/4.
Okay. But then, in the new drawings, there's a lot of windows on the back and a lot of 6/6. So I just wanted to understand the decision behind that and behind the reconstruction of the front porch.
So we have historic evidence based on what we can see from kind of some internal demolition that's done on the house, and that's in these photos, but we can see where there's some old corbels and things like that, memory of that old front porch that's just been enclosed. We can also see where the structure of the house changes from kind of a very old wood, full 2x4 to more modern modular, nominal 2x4s. So we can tell that the front was different before. And then we have houses across the street are kind of precedent for that as well, that we can reference. So we kind of forensically can determine that there was a porch on this house that wasn't, they've just enclosed it based on the way it looks now. So that's that part of it. And
Okay.
then, what was the other question?
The window grid patterns?
Sure. So most of the house has the 1/1 for the front-facing things. There is that one odd 4/4 that's in that side room, and I honestly don't know the provenance of that window. I just know that it's there.
Yeah.
So what we were looking at is with the kind of keeping the 1/1s in any of the historic footprint that we're going to be reconstructing, and then to make it kind of different for the new addition, that's where we changed the light pattern to kind of these 4/4s back in the back.
Okay.
So really any of the addition windows that have double hungs have 4/4s. Anything that was kind of part of the original footprint has 1/1s.
Okay. Oh, and so it just feels like the dining room has a ton of windows. And with that grid pattern, it gets pretty busy, and different from the original structure. But there was, the roof materials. It looks like the front porch and the back, maybe metal. So what was the decision behind that?
It's kind of the historic, those low slope front porches had, historically had those kind of a standing seam metal on them. And then the rest of it is asphalt shingle.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody?
Mr. Chair, can I ask for, I'm so sorry, I did not bring it up. The proposed dormer on the rear is a new addition as well. It doesn't meet our guidelines for a dormer. That was previously addressed in the last DRC. I didn't mention it this time, but feedback on that and its visibility would be appreciated from you all.
Yeah, I don't have is there like a 3D view?
On the last page, A2
Sort
of 3.
Yeah. I
So-
don't know that it's visible from any streetscape, is it?
So that's this photo down here in the bottom left.
Would be.
That would be in the winter. So go to the one on the left, the actual photo, if you would. Yep. So that's kind of what you see, right? And that's only in the dead of winter when you're at the farthest point that you could possibly ever see, which is maybe happens for like 1 second, right, as you're up the road. You may be able to see, if you go to the 3D image, you may be able to see like kind of just a moment of the edge of that, at that one very far vantage point when there is no vegetation on the tree, assuming that the trees never grow any bigger, or there's no other vegetation that's planted along that property line. So that's kind of what you see. We feel fairly confident that for most people, you will never see, based on just the vantage points that you will have when you're looking at the house. It will never be visible from the street.
Okay. Anybody any feedback on that dormer?
Yeah, my comment on that, it's very unusual. I mean, on any house of that style that I can think of in Franklin, I can't just right off imagine where I've seen that in that back part of the house as a dormer. I think somehow it interrupts the architectural style, the flow, and the balance of the house. And it'd be hard to support it. I don't know if it can be seen or not from the street. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. But I do think it just doesn't fit that style of a house in that location.
Sure. And we've taken great care to make it as minimal as possible on that, but it is, again, on a side elevation. I would ask the board or commission to consider the fact that it is not a prominent elevation, that it's only seen on that. You won't ever see it from the other side, right, because it's completely obscured by the gable. So,
Mr. Chair, I
Another
think,
request.
didn't we run into this a few months ago on another application? And isn't there something in the guidelines that relates to how far that dormer is set back? Is that right?
So dormers should typically be 30 inches from exterior sidewalls and then set at least 1 foot back from the exterior wall below, so it's not considered a wall dormer.
Is there anything about where it starts from the front elevation?
As in, like, distance from the front of the house?
Right.
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And what's the roof slope of that dormer?
212.
212, and how far is it off the main ridge of that L at the back?
How far down is it? Ooh, I'd say it's probably 8 inches down, something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I think part of it is we're looking at it in 2D is the best place to see. It's this 2D elevation, and it looks long. I mean, I can think of a lot of kind of rural properties where something like this has been done on a house of this vintage, like a farmhouse or something, where they've added dormers like this. But it's part of what's a little scary is the length of it. I don't know if there's a way inside to make it a traditional dormer on top of that roof, but it's fairly well hidden. I mean, you can't see it from the front, can't see it from the right side. You'd have to get pretty far away to see it from the left side. So, you know, in terms of impact, I don't know that it has. I agree with Brian that the form is a little atypical because it's just a big, long dormer. And so it stops feeling like a dormer at some length and starts feeling like a second story. But I think it's stepped back, looks like pretty far from that left side wall. So, you know, if it were only a foot off of that outside wall, it really looked big. But since it's so far back inset, that might, and you might be able to play with that in plan too, or if you can pull it even further away, it just makes your windowsills worse and things like that.
Sure. You can see the, if it's helpful to see the second floor plan and the roof plan, those are in here as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of
So it's
amazed to
really
see
far.
that it had a great room, a full bath, and a closet in that space. You've got a lot in that space.
Right, and a lot of that is in the existing dorm, you know, the peaked roof that's up there. It's just hard to get any more space out of that because we're trying to, like we said, we're trying to maintain that historic form. So that kind of pushes everything down. So that's the only really way we can get space up there is to have a kind of a shed roof that hides behind the two gables. It's not a massive space up there. It's just it's almost not quite 20 by really 20, something like that. I mean, but it's gonna have, the roofs are coming in on it and things like that. It's smaller. It's not just a big cavernous thing.
You might look at what you can do on that elevation to shorten that or think of a different way to shape it or something. There may be a way.
Is it the length that we're talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a way to totally hide it, but if you had that same perspective and you pulled the length in off the end, or maybe it doesn't connect to that main crossing L, there may be a way to do that so it looks like a dormer that's not connected on one side. Right now, it's a shed that connects into a roof instead of a dormer sitting on the roof by itself and not touching. If that makes sense.
And I think you may have hit it on the head a while ago, at least from my perspective. It kind of gives that two-story look, at least what I'm seeing in that 2D. Right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of two stories.
Well, the 2D, I think, is cheating our eyes a little bit. If you obviously have this in 3D, you might just bring the view you've got drawing number 5 on sheet A203. If that
Just pull it
rotated to the
around
right a
further.
little more and we could just see how far back it sits and that it's totally hidden, maybe we all go, it's really tucked in.
Sure.
Might be helpful. And then whatever you can do to just make it as compact as you can tolerate up there.
How much more square footage is this than the original footprint?
I can tell you. As soon as my program plays nice. So the original house was 1,946 square feet, and this full thing now is 3,100 square feet.
Okay.
So
And that's your footprint.
that's the footprint. Well, that does include some second floor space, I do believe. Let me confirm that on the, we've really kind of kept it the same footprint we were adding before, so it's around, around 30, yeah, so it's around 1,300 square feet, something like that. Maybe not quite 1,000 square feet,
Okay.
yeah.
So that'd be one of the one of the kind of overages we would consider for it being more than 50% of the original footprint, which this is one of the larger lots. And
Yeah, so-
typically on this street, we've
We've
seen
got a-
those favorably.
80% landscape coverage even at this current.
Yeah.
It's a 40,000 square foot lot and we're 3,100 square feet, so.
Yeah. And you know, we've talked a lot about the house plans here. I think making sure all your kind of due diligence is done on, you know, the demolition portion is
Right.
is the harder part here. You know, we've seen some. I think the difference now than before is now things are pulled apart and opened up. And so hopefully there's some more kind of information, good information on like, there's no guesswork here. Now we know exactly where things are rotted, what they look like. We can get good picture. Whereas before it was, you know, well, there's a big hole in the floor and the roof's missing and we know it's water damaged, but it's not really gutted inside to really see how bad it went. So I'd be curious to see what an updated engineer's analysis, and as Brian said, our guidelines are specific about who's doing the review and
Sure.
what experience they have. And, you know, obviously you all have experience in old houses, but we, you know, we don't let designers speak for themselves here.
You gotta cross all your Ts and dot
Yeah.
your Is, I get it.
Yeah.
So, and this, remember this, well, it may not matter, but this demolition is the only one that's requesting to build back the building the way it was.
Right.
We're not preparing some other thing that will be there.
Yeah, and that's,
So-
I think the burden of design drawings is going to be heavy on you all to really delineate really how it's going to go back together. Because, you know, modern codes aren't going to let you use 2x4 rafters and things or
Right.
2x6s. It's like, okay, where are you making that up? Are the ceilings getting lower inside so that the outside is as historically
Right.
kind of spot on as it can be, or is there an ask where you need to do something different? We've seen both where people have said, hey, the whole roof's going to be 2.5 inches taller because we had to, it may have been some of your
Right.
projects.
know.
And so we like to have those drawn out, even if it's, you know, eave sections and things. Here's what's there, here's what's going to change because of codes and modern materials and limitations we have. We don't want any surprises there. Just draw it all out so we understand that what we're going to get when it's done.
And to Chisel's credit, I will say, probably within the first year or so I was on the board, there was a house in bad enough condition, it did get a demolition approval, and you put the house back that was there previous. And I was in the field, not on that property, with another person, and they thought that was the original old house.
That's
So you
great.
did a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We try. We like to protect the historic fabric of Franklin, so.
Any other comments here on this particular one?
Well, I would say the changes that were made are very appropriate
Yeah.
to the rear.
Can I ask one more question while I've got you? On the windows, there was a comment before about the kitchen windows. We have two options that we would like your feedback on. Our preference is for triple windows in the kitchen. That would be on the next, maybe the next one. Yes, this one. So this is the rear left elevation. The gable that you see right there with the three windows is the kitchen. The sink is kind of proposed in the center of that gable that lines up with the cross gable in the fireplace on the other side. We would love to have three windows for the symmetry of it and the balance. So I wanted to get your feedback on that.
Anybody?
The symmetry and balance on what?
Just on what's happening on the interior, plus just the way it adds more light to the interior space. We thought, because it's a new addition, it's not part of the historic footprint that we're trying to kind of replicate. We had maybe some more flexibility to
I'm
do something a little
indifferent to
different.
it.
It gets so deep in the lot.
Yeah, I don't.
It is, it's very far back, and some of those 3D images, you can hardly tell if it's two or three probably when you're looking at it from the street.
I have no preference on it. Does anybody have any preference, 2 or 3 there?
Well, while there may not be preference, and it might be just fine, historically, I don't, from what I've seen historically, you'd see 2.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see 3.
Unless you were Greek, where they always use odd numbers.
Right.
Columns and openings.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think if this were an ask up closer to the front or even on the historic house, like changing that pair to 3, I think you'd hear different feedback. Matter of fact, we've reviewed a house recently
Recently.
where they wanted 3 instead of 2, and we ex-nayed that. That was not seen favorably. So, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Are we 2 hours in? Do we need a quick break? Yes, please. Okay, I need one, so since I'm the chair, we're taking a break. We'll be back, let's come back at 10 after, that's 6 or 7 minutes here, thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Got two more items left. Item number 7, let's do that one here. Consideration of new construction, signage and site alterations for the Williamson County EMS at 110 Aldersgate Way. Lacey Fuller is not here.
No, I'm Jeff Earwood,
Is it Jeff
Earwood.
Earwood? Okay. All right, Jeff, if you want to give us an overview of what's new.
Yes, sir. So last we were here, much different design. Obviously, we took the agrarian comment and interpreted that to the versions you've seen here. I think we received an early comment after submission about roof options. So we've got two different versions here. The two differences are, I believe, just the siding patterns and the roof. One shows standing seam, one shows asphalt. It could be some combination of those two. And then the cladding is either board and batten vertical or horizontal. The sign, the verbiage may change on the sign, but I believe this was the proposed sign that we believe meets the guidelines.
Okay.
Site plan wise, nothing's changed.
Okay. Let's hear from staff on their comments here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The site at 110 Aldersgate Way came before the Historic Zoning Commission earlier this year, and it was deferred. The proposal includes the construction of a new EMS facility, a post and panel sign, and site alterations. Since the last Historic Zoning Commission meeting, the applicant has incorporated the feedback from the Historic Zoning Commission into the proposal. The proposed building design has two different options in the siding. One is a horizontal siding and a board and batten siding with the same brick detailing. While the guidelines do recommend utilizing building materials that create a sense of permanence, such as brick or stone, commissioners have commented that materiality should be compatible with the other buildings on the site, such as the agrarian barn and the Daniel McMahon house. The horizontal siding would blend well with both of these buildings. More information is needed on the materiality of the siding, whether it is wood or cementitious, and the proposed reveal. Measurements of the building, elevations of every side of the building, and information on the windows and doors will also need to be provided at further meetings. The stained wood detailing above the entrances, as well as the wood brackets that are below the awning, are not a common feature that are seen in Franklin's historic districts. The guidelines recommend the use of a prominent masonry base, such as a dimensional water table that does not exceed the height of the finished floor. The use of stained wood and the high water table leans to be a more modern interpretation of a farmhouse. For the proposed post and panel sign, it does appear to align with the guidelines, but the wood would need to be a finished wood to align with the guidelines. Then, for the proposed site alterations, such as the driveway, parking area, walkway, and generator location, all appear to be appropriate. Should the generator be installed at the proposed location, screening the mechanical equipment is required by the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's hear some discussion here amongst the committee.
I'll say something.
Okay,
The
Mary?
staff comments on the brick being down to a more traditional foundation, I would agree with. To me, the lower image, the clapboard siding, is probably something you would see around here more. And agree with the staff comments on the unpainted wood, and I'd be interested to hear what other people think. I think the bay looks great. About the door entrance.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Mary. I mean, either version, the board and batten with the asphalt shingle or the horizontal siding with the metal roof. Although being a fire hall, the metal roof might be a good advertisement. I would say on the front entrance, it's atypical of what you would see, in a historic type of outbuilding with the large brick columns and I guess that's like a little vestibule that you'd walk into. And then with the over roof that comes down onto that, I wonder if there was a way to, quieten that down so it looked more something like I don't know, maybe the stoop roof would tuck up under the actual edge of the roof where your soffit is, rather than going to the very top of that and having that over roof. But, that's I'd like to hear other people's comments on that.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
I think this
Bob?
is a much improved version of the previous one. I like both the styles. I like both the roofs, so.
Okay. Angela, anything?
Well, I think the clapboard, the second version, to me, lends more towards an agrarian look that's not residential. And I think that changing the height of the brick here is to something that would be lower is going to give is going to be more in the direction of what we were thinking. The heavy timber, the stained beams, especially over the front door, are not giving the same kind of direction in my mind along the brick around the front door. No, it's not working for me in terms of being agrarian.
Madeline?
I think it's really, really close.
Yeah.
I think
So much better.
yeah, I think I agree with pretty much what everybody said with the lowering the water table to a more traditional height on the brick, figuring out something with the headers. I think too, the horizontal siding makes more sense with the area. I'm kind of indifferent on the roof. And then I feel like we should give him some feedback on what to do with the brackets that don't meet the guidelines.
Mhm.
Maybe some direction there. I'm not sure what that is.
Okay.
Maybe y'all do.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Holly, did you have any thoughts?
I guess so the brackets, I think you're trying to make them look kind of farm-like, is that right? Or, so I think that if those ones didn't work, it wouldn't be more of a traditional one that we would be going for. It'd be something that matched the agrarian style, which I don't know if that would really be any columns that really match that. Do you guys have any feedback about that? Because I don't think we're talking about making it like classical or anything, obviously.
Yeah, you know what it seems to me like, if that area that projects out, that's your entrance, if that also had siding, and then, like I said, even if that tucked under the roof line, as far as where the soffit is, that even with the brackets and all, and maybe if they were toned down a little bit, and that might work better. It may be seeing it on the brick that actually is what our eye's catching.
Yeah.
And, the fact that the vestibule, the door is recessed, gives protection from the weather. If somebody's up there ringing the bell, waiting on somebody to come get them. So we could live without the awning. We could live without the projection above, if that made it feel more appropriate.
I was looking at this entry piece and, most, even the side porch that you see kind of has that shed roof tucked in underneath the high eave, kind of like Brian's talking about. That center mass with the entry kind of comes off a little kind of coastal looking to me. It's kind of like a beachy detailed with the shed roof and then another kind of shed in front of it. I agree with Madeline. You're not too far off here. I think some of the kind of stained elements maybe aren't all that kind of necessary, and like even the kind of header beam could just be trim. One of the things that proportion wise is kind of funny here is, we asked you for an agrarian kind of shape, and you got that, but this is not a barn like look or a house. It's kind of stuck in between, and it's a scale that has to be bigger than a house because it's got these big apparatus bays, and it's just a different scale. And I think one of the things that could help is if the windows that are kind of on each side of the door, if that head height, either the windows got taller or the head height just moved up, one or the other. There's just a lot of wall above it because just the scale of the building's a little taller. I think it's kind of giving it this kind of big forehead there around the front, where it doesn't feel that way on the apparatus bay because those doors are tall. So there's just not a ton of siding above it. I'd be curious this entry box with the front door, if you studied it a little more, if there's a shed roof version that kind of tucks beneath. I think a smaller gable form there, if it were siding, just a gable form facing that was similar to the apparatus bay, but maybe had a lower bearing point, so it was a little more pedestrian scale, could just be a different look. I agree with siding, the horizontal siding being maybe the most appropriate, just because the nearest kind of historic thing that we have to compare it to is the McMahon house? Is around the corner, and it's siding. I think that's probably most appropriate. But like I said, if this went to kind of more traditional casing details around the windows without the kind of timber header, maybe you don't need brackets at all, and you could just have one shed roof that just has an exaggerated overhang, but not so much that you need brackets. All of a sudden, it just starts to simplify a little and brings the scale to a place that, we know it's a taller building than a house would be. But if we can fake the eye into thinking that it's got proportions that are more human scale with those window heights and things, it could be helpful.
Mr. Chair, the metal shed, if it was pushed down to relate to the door, that would be a more traditional look.
Sure.
Even if it had some smaller scale bracket like you, and I think the comment about the windows is important.
Yes. Yeah, and I think what's weird about it now is we've got the shed roof coming off the main roof, and then the proximity of the other shed is like, man, those are so close to just being one thing.
Right.
So I think that's what you're getting at. If you're going to have the canopy, bring it down, and maybe the canopy doesn't have to be as heavy feeling. I think we have some language in our guidelines for canopies, and a lot of them are, especially on commercial buildings, are kind of metal canopies of some sort, and they're a lot just more slender and kind of delicate looking. This looks kind of heavy timbery to me and has, kind of a heavier feel for a building that we're trying to probably bring it down to more of a residential scaled civic building, if that makes sense.
I also just want to clarify for the applicant, I feel like, to your point, the shed roof on the side is what you're saying we would like to see, right? Where it's kind of set underneath the main roof line?
Yeah, I think that's one version.
Because
that
I'd
you could
be,
do.
I think I'd be a little concerned at the front, if you just remove the shed roof with the brackets, it may look too contemporary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd study that area a bit.
Yeah.
And just, like I said, it could be that it's just a little gable of some sorts that does everything you need it to do, but is a more traditional form. Because this, in its format now, I could make an argument that it's almost a wall dormer of sorts. It's a shed roof that's taller than the main roof, and it sits on the main roof. That's a sort of a dormer. So just study that area, but I think it's very close. Materiality's better. The form, much better for this specific site, I would say. Anything else? Any specific questions you have beyond what we've covered?
No, sir.
Okay. Cool. All right. Thank y'all very much. Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. Okay. Excuse me. All right, item number 8 is discussion of demolition and new construction at 234 and 242 Fifth Avenue. Greg Gamble.
Hi, good evening. My name is Greg Gamble, and I'm representing the applicant, the Butler family, who own these two properties. The two properties are identified as 234 and 242 Fifth Avenue. Very interesting properties. These properties have been a part of a bigger discussion since probably about the 2010 flood. And I kind of want to walk you through some of the background, the history on this area, which I think is very, very relevant. If you can go to the next page, then this shows the site plan here. On the northeast side of Fifth Avenue is the historic district. The properties that you're seeing that are on the southwest side of Fifth Avenue are not in the historic district. And so there's a oversight to the Fifth Avenue district that is applied on the northwest side of Fifth that doesn't get the same oversight on the south side. We are currently in design, I don't know if you knew or not, the bank that sits at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Bridge, we're currently in design with a new owner for that property. They will likely be demolishing that building because of the floodplain regulations that are required within the Fifth Avenue district. And one of the reasons why I believe that the Fifth Avenue district is on both the northwest side and the southeast side, I'm sorry, I said that backwards, northeast side and the southwest side, is because they didn't want to change character down the middle of a road. They wanted both sides of the street to relate to each other. I hope that, and maybe we'll see over time, that large parking lots aren't the predominant use for Fifth Avenue. I hope we see an evolution there. And so if you flip to the next, this is the 100-year floodplain, that dark blue line there. Now, in 2010, it's understanding we had somewhere between an 80 and an 85-year storm event. Didn't quite make it to the 100-year. We've had other flood events, though, that have reached different levels in this area. The two properties are at a finished floor elevation of 629 feet. The flood elevation, though, is at 636. So we got about a 7-foot difference between where that 100-year floodplain is and where the property actually is physically. So then on the next page here, we're showing them combined. What you'll notice is that the Fifth Avenue district doesn't cover the entire floodplain area. It's very specific between Margin Street and Bridge Street. And it's very specific that it's on both sides of Fifth. So in 2010, there was a flood event we're all aware of. This area did flood. And between 2010 and 2019, the city, aldermen, and planning commission were having conversations about creating this Fifth Avenue district. Why? Because the economics of rebuilding the buildings and meeting the 100-year floodplain requirements and getting a tenant that could afford that lease in those buildings were constantly pushing and pulling the conversation. In 2017, the City of Franklin Planning Commission adopted a revision to Envision Franklin, creating the Fifth Avenue North District in Envision Franklin. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. In 2019, just 2 years later, the board, mayor, and aldermen adopted the Fifth Avenue District as a base zone district in the zoning ordinance. It allowed only uses that did not have overnight stays. So still a commercial-based zone district, but you couldn't do multifamily in the 100-year floodplain. You couldn't do residential in the 100-year floodplain, and you couldn't do hotels in the 100-year floodplain. So really restricting the type of businesses that would be allowed within that district. Conversations have continued. In 2023, 2024, the Fifth Avenue District was revised, and we'll talk about that here on the next couple of pages. So for the Envision Franklin portion, the Fifth Avenue North design concept represents an important commercial corridor leading into historic downtown through the Harpeth River, Sharps Branch floodplain. The intent is to improve upon the area and to transform the character of the built environment in order to extend the vibrant downtown core. So within Envision Franklin, it states that along Fifth Avenue North, flat roofs with parapet walls are appropriate with the intent to de-emphasize the overall building height. A corner architectural treatment should be designed for buildings at the intersection of Bridge Street and New Highway 96. Architectural features such as an arcade are appropriate to span mid-block driveway entrances. So kind of setting up a bit more of an urban form along Fifth. Building height, the maximum building height should be 2 stories above the base flood elevation, the first usable floor being located above the base flood elevation in accordance with the floodplain protection standards. Along the north half of Fifth Avenue North block, the second floor should be stepped back 20 feet from the front facade so as to reduce the overall appearance of height in relation to the National Registered Cemetery. So the base flood elevation is 7 feet below the 100-year floodplain, or 7 foot of storage, I guess you should say, between where the existing grade is and where the 100-year storm is. The floodplain regulations require that the first finished floor be 1 foot above the flood elevation. So we're talking about 8 feet there up in the air. With the zoning ordinance, it really kind of repeats some of the principles in Envision Franklin. And states that along Fifth Avenue North, within 300 feet of Margin Street, within 500 feet of Mount Hope Street, the second story shall have a minimum building setback of 20 feet, and also covers the same height statements that are in Envision Franklin. So those are both covered. In 2017, when this district was adopted in Envision Franklin, these images were provided. It shows buildings along Fifth Avenue, and it shows kind of this intent that both sides of the street were being considered in kind of an overall district master plan. Now, in 2023, these items were removed. These images were taken out of Envision Franklin, so they're no longer a part of the Planning Commission's consideration. They've been removed. But it does give you a little bit of background as to what some of the thought was going in 2017. So the 2 buildings that we are asking you to consider today did appear in the revised 2019 National Registered listings. The first one at 242 Fifth Avenue is a non-contributing structure. This is a remodel around 1940. 1-story rectangular plan commercial building with a side gable roof of asphalt shingles and exterior of brick and stucco. The facade has been remodeled with full width cover with a shed roof and fluted metal columns, multi-light double doors, and fixed multi-light windows. Attached to the rear elevation is a large addition of concrete block. On the second structure, 2034, this one also was listed as non-contributing in 2019. This is a circa 1980 1-story rectangular plan commercial building with a gable roof of asphalt shingles and exterior stucco siding and vinyl siding. The facade has a full width projecting gable front cover with iconic motif columns at the ends. There's an off-centered single light glass and wood door under the cover. On the south elevation, there's a recessed bay with another entrance, and the roof has a square cupola. Our team asked Mr. Hathaway here with 906 to report on the architectural integrity of the structure. I've asked him to talk a little bit about the architectural analysis. But before he does, this presentation was provided to you in this format, which is it's a PDF document that's been uploaded. It's called Demolition Considerations. It has the information in the presentation in it that you'll review tonight. It does have some structural information in it as well, and photographs of the interior and exterior of the building. We also provided for you a height analysis that shows the heights that are of existing buildings along Fifth Avenue, heights that you have to take into consideration on Main Street in the historic district. And so I wanted to make sure you were aware that that's available to you. Also, a PDF about some sales and marketing timeline and efforts by the existing owners to find a tenant for these buildings, as well as an appraisal, which is required as a part of the checklist when requesting demolition. So we've tried to be very methodical about providing you kind of step-by-step responses to the guidelines as it relates to the demolition of a structure. But I'll let Mike jump in on the architectural integrity real quick.
Sure. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. When you look at both of those buildings, the elevations have been modified substantially from what they were originally in the 40s and 50s. When we looked at the comparison, the hardware store or the gas station was no longer recognizable. You know, everything's been added, things have been removed. Fluted columns, which I don't know why you would decide to put fluted columns on this building, but that was done. So the integrity, authenticity is gone, in our opinion. The second elevation where it's the gabled in and it's, storefront's been added, the whole front facade was removed. Again, it no longer maintains its original integrity. So we believe it's muddled at best at this point and would take a lot to bring it back to its original form because it's been lost.
Thank you, Mike. On the next page then, I want to kind of deep dive just a little bit on some of the floodplain information. If you'll go to the next page, this shows the front of the two buildings. Here, the base flood elevation, or the base elevation, the existing building elevation, I'll get it out in a minute, is at 629. In just a few years ago, 2021, these buildings flooded to the 632 contour. And then the 100-year floodplain is 4 feet above that at the 636 contour. Okay? This shows the rear of the buildings. Again, the base elevation of the building, and then the various flood elevations, how those are reflected on the buildings. The next then shows the rear of building 242, front. That's the front. Oh, they're the columns, the fluted columns. Sorry, I couldn't see. And then on the next one is the rear elevation there. You can see the additions that were made as well. So one of the most difficult things for my client to overcome is with any office tenant, shop tenant, retail, whatever professional services that might occupy these buildings, is that these flood events are real. They know it. Property loss and loss of furniture inside, loss of what's in the building is real. This is a photograph from 1948 that shows 2 gas stations in this location. In 1975, you can see that the building elevations had been changed from 48 to 75. And on the next page, then we have the 2010 flood, and then again, the 2021 flood. So this is definitely a flood-prone area. The real economic value of these properties is something that the City of Franklin Planning Commission and Board Mayor and Alderman said we don't want to lose. The property owners have an asset here, we know that they can build a building that can respond to the floodplain. A building that doesn't have the same type of structure on that first 8 feet that would allow the water to move in and out. We know that we can put HVAC and utilities and things like that above the floodplain. And we can design a building in a way that can meet the flood design requirements that are in the City of Franklin zoning ordinance. On the next page then, we've just put together a few little bullet points, maybe for you to refer back to as you're reviewing these documents as much as anything, but just to run through those real quick. Can the building be brought up to code and rented? As soon as you spend more than 50% of the value of the building, not the property, but the building, then the entire building has to be brought up to code, which means we would be raising it to 8 to 9 feet above the ground that's there now. So the value of building 234 is $436,000. If we spend more than $218,000, we have to raise it up. We've had estimators, contractors saying that we would need about 1.7 million in order to bring that building to a usable office, retail space in some way, so we would certainly trigger that. With building 242, it's valued at 191,000 and would need about 1.5 million to its use today. Again, if at any point you want us to do a deeper dive into like the structural issues or concerns that relate to this building, we've provided that in a PDF and we're happy to do that and answer those questions. Can the building be lifted 9 feet? It's currently on a slab foundation. And so to raise it up, you were talking about having to reconstruct it in its entirety to do that. If you could fix the building, would it make financial sense to put the amount of money that would be needed into those buildings at their current square footage? We would be looking at leases that would be between $93 and $100 per square foot. Currently today, even on downtown on Main Street, people are typically paying about $45 to $50 a square foot. In rent on this side of Fifth Avenue, it would be more typical to see about $35 per square foot in a lease rate. On the next page, are these buildings historically significant? They're not listed on the National Registry. They're not listed on the State Registry. They've been identified as non-contributing in prior reviews. They've been heavily altered over time. They're missing their original materials, and structurally they are compromised. On the next one then, if we don't do anything, they continue to pay $31,000 per year in property taxes. They would be maintained as vacant structures. I don't really think that would be the intent of what the city is trying to achieve with the Fifth Avenue district. And if a building is constructed that's compliant, it would cost around $10 million, would have rents of about $38 per square foot. It would be within the range of what the market would be willing to pay. And these would be built according to the city's flood design guidelines. They would be built above the 100-year floodplain, and we would reduce the risk for those structures. So if you can keep going one more. We are required, as a part of a demolition request, to submit what could go back there, what we might see go back there. So this isn't really a conversation about the design of this building. It's not. Usually there's a step in the design process where we're coming to you asking you about massing and scale and the appropriateness of the building. That's not really this exercise. We've kind of talked with Emily about this, that we have a requirement to provide to you an example of something that could go back. And so this page here probably is the better example. And this shows base floor of existing floor elevation of 629.2. That's the garage floor elevation. It would be actually recessed down a few feet so that we could get clearance for a vehicle to park underneath the building. The first floor elevation at 640.2 would meet the requirements that the building have the finished floor elevation a minimum of 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain. The second floor roof then is at 653.7, and then the rooftop is at 667.7. So this building is hypothetically 40 foot 10 inches tall, which is less than the average building on Main Street, which we have talked to on other recent proposals. The next couple of pages show some other views on the, this is the front elevation. On this elevation here, the coffee shop sits so much higher on the hill, higher in elevation on the hill. It's really closer to that second floor than it is to the first floor. So as we start to really kind of understand the streetscape of Fifth Avenue, the intent behind the Envision Franklin policy and the intent behind the zoning ordinance, and start kind of putting these pieces in place, we start to understand the streetscape better. It's given us the opportunity, as we kind of go to the next step, to bring to you multiple views from around the building, the relationship to 906 Studios office that's on 4th, just on the opposite side of this. So we are getting to a point now with the design of architecture, we can start looking at this from different angles to understand that massing and scale and height and how these relationships work. But really, we need your input and your feedback on these existing buildings and a request for demolition, which we would like to bring to you.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I told Mike that he was going to walk you through the new design, but then I just flipped the script on him a little bit. So if anybody wants to hear more about the architecture, he's ready.
Let's hear from staff, and we may come back with some questions. I'm sure we've got some different things to ask, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The sites at 234 and 242 Fifth Avenue North are a part of the Downtown Franklin Historic District. It is proposed to demolish both of these buildings and construct one building in their place. Demolition is highly discouraged unless there are extraordinary circumstances so as to maintain the integrity and sense of place associated with Franklin's Historic District. The National Register defined both of these buildings as non-contributing, but the Historic Zoning Commission has the ultimate determination of whether these buildings are contributing to the local historic district. The application notes that the building cannot be raised the required feet to remove the building from the flood area, but a variance can be proposed to the Board of Zoning Appeals in order for the building to not be raised, so the historic appearance of the building can be retained. If substantial improvement were to be triggered with the repairs and renovations, the structure would be required to be brought into compliance with current floodplain regulations unless a variance for historic structures is approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals at the recommendation of the Historic Zoning Commission. The BZA can grant a variance for the minimum necessary deviation from floodplain requirements for historic structures. There are elements within the proposal that are not a part of the existing Envision Franklin document that was updated in 2023. The updated plan removed images from the 2017 plan that showed potential redevelopment possibilities along the Fifth Avenue North corridor. Since a building was successfully rehabilitated on the corner of Fifth Avenue North and North Margin Street, the renderings were removed due to the success of the project. The design of the block was ultimately changed from the 2017 vision. The existing buildings contribute to the established character of the corridor into downtown. One of the demolition considerations is the impact of removing a building from its existing location relative to its context. Should the two buildings be removed, the proposed building will encompass both of the lots, and its height will be nearly 41 feet in height. The adjacent buildings are 15 feet 5 inches and then 15 feet in height. While it's up to the Historic Zoning Commission if one or more of the demolition approval criteria is met, information has been provided from an architect supporting that the building has lost its architectural and historical integrity, stating that the buildings have been heavily altered from their original form and are unrecognizable. Information has been included in the application stating that the existing buildings are an economic hardship, and partial information of the structural integrity/deterioration of the buildings. There was missing information on the cost estimates for rehabilitation versus demolition and construction of a comparable structure. We'd like to seek feedback from the commission if these buildings are contributing to the local historic district and their general feedback of the proposal of demolition. And there were several project considerations left on this review, and we'll provide those to the applicant with the DRC recap. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we're talking about demo to start, and if you've got specific questions about the proposal, I think we heard from the applicant that it's really kind of more of a generic shape, so concept, so we'll get to that. But let's talk about the demo requirements first and what your all's thoughts are there. Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So we know we have the three criteria. That has the building lost its historic integrity or character, loss of structural integrity, and then unreasonable economic hardship. So we know those criteria. Either one of them, I mean, we can recommend demolition. I agree with the architect's assessment that it has lost its historic integrity. You just don't see, well, on the building that's now Storehouse Number 9, I mean, it had a lot of architectural features that were historic that were still there, even interior-wise. The loss of structural integrity, I mean, I can see these buildings have sat empty. I can't tell you when they were last used, except maybe for the one that U-Haul was in for a while. I mean, they've been sitting empty. So in the time I've lived in Franklin, I have seen water in these structures at least 3 times, maybe 4. So we know that's going to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, that to me plays into the economic hardship part, because who's going to want us, rent space or do something in a building in the floodplain that floods a lot?
Right.
So, to me, I see they've met all 3 criteria, not just one.
No,
Kristen, Angela?
I would absolutely agree with everything that you just said. It would just be, to my mind, with the floodplain looking like that, it's unreasonable to ask anyone to try to restore those buildings, because it's going to flood. I think we can be very sure about that. And
Yeah,
then,
maybe if it was a really architecturally remarkable building or something.
Absolutely.
If Hiram Lodge sat over there,
Absolutely. If it hadn't
we'd
already
fight to
ticked-
the death, right?
yeah, if it hadn't already ticked the other boxes that Brian just listed.
Right.
So with all of those things together, I think we're headed towards demolition.
I think, so I've lived here 11 years, and I've never seen those inhabited. And if you look at the streetscape, you see a lot of empty spaces in that area, a lot of pavement. So I agree with Brian on what he said about losing that integrity.
Madeline, anything?
I agree with everything
Sam?
that's been said.
Okay.
I agree. If they hadn't lost their architectural integrity, unless they were really important, and I'm thinking like the Old Jail, if you raised them up that much, they'd lose it.
Yeah,
Then.
inherently, yeah.
Right.
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 And that's why we have that mechanism for making a recommendation to planning where they can kind of grant a variance. And we've done that on a few, but they were, didn't have all the other criteria that were stacked against them necessarily, so, okay.
And to add to that, so we've kind of agreed on that. As we go forward with this, that district is going to change. We have seen what change has come to Columbia Avenue and that district. This district is going to change big time too. And we don't have purview on the other side, just on this side. So I would like to see if we can do something, we kind of maybe help set a precedent to what happens on this side and the other side, even though we have no purview on that side. So, I mean, I'd love to try to, we got to really think about this.
Excellent point.
We're happy to work with you to do that.
Yeah. All right, just generic feedback here on what maybe happens to this property. You know, I guess I can start a little bit on here. I have some concerns about the two lots turning into one big building. Not to say it won't be one big building, but I think it ought to look like multiple tenant spaces, if that makes sense. And even in our, this is different than our Main Street, but, you know, we've had discussions about kind of this Main Street look on this Harpeth industrial project back that direction. I think this is more closely related to Main Street than that project. And, you know, I think looking at those guidelines closely about what kind of a downtown core might look like. And, you know, I think the City Hall project that we reviewed, that's a civic building that people would expect, like, oh, it's got a more of a monumental scale to it because of what it is. But as they got to kind of the tenant spaces in the back, where they've got some leasable space and there's the park, I think that was thought about correctly. Like, that's a good sized piece of building, but it's broken into pieces. It has kind of proper storefronts and suites that are identifiable from the front. How do you do that with a floodplain when, yes, it may have a storefront of sort, but it's up there. So thinking through that, I think to make this successful, it would need to look like it's made up of pieces that respect kind of the idea that, hey, it's along this side, because again, it's going to set the rhythm and precedent for what does this corridor become. And I don't think, you know, down Columbia, there's, you know, the police station. Again, that's a monumental thing. If you were saying, hey, we think, you know, the Tennessee State Legislature's remote offices are going to be here, we'd go, well, maybe it needs to be a big building like this. But I think for this corridor, something that's set apart into identifiable human scale pieces is a good approach. And then kind of these setbacks and step backs.
The rhythm of the Main Street buildings are a good clue.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
As far as dimensions, widths.
Even in maybe they're, you know, out here there's a little more space and not so much density as Main Street yet. So maybe those suites aren't a 22-foot rhythm or whatever they are. More of a, hey, we're on our way out of the historic district. Maybe they're a little exaggerated, but not too much. When I look at some of these things here, this front rooftop deck, I don't know how I feel about it. You know, I get the guidelines or some of these Envision Franklin talk about stepping back. I think those are good sky plane guidance, but I don't know that you should automatically default to, oh, now we've got a spot we can walk out on, because it says things about railings and heights and mass to pull that off. And I think it'd be more successful to have a proper cornice and some things that relate to kind of historic elements that we see elsewhere. So I'll let other people talk about what they might see here as well. Madeline?
I agree with what you were saying. I think with him talking about that and looking at what's up on the screen, that center portion, I mean, even like, there was another project where we talked about playing with the depths, so maybe that center portion is set back from the primary structures, and then playing with differences in exterior materials. Maybe one's siding, maybe one's brick, you know. And then even on the sides, those primary structures, playing with the heights, maybe. just so it doesn't feel, you mentioned the mass.
Mm.
So I think that would definitely
Sure.
come up in a voting meeting.
And I think considering, which I don't know what I'm talking about, but worth studying, is best practices, building in the flood area, what type of green space or, how it impacts the whole thing, because we'd like to end up better than we were,
Yeah,
not worse.
I would assume you all have to do a whole HEC-RAS flood modeling thing, like the whole gamut. It's
You'll
the
have
least
to
fun
make-
part of all this.
We'll have to make the building flood-proof, I know that. I know we'll do
Yeah, has to.
that. And then what I don't know is just what happens on the ground.
Well, that's,
Parking is gonna be underneath. We will have an
Right.
elevator core. We'll have stairs that go up to that first floor living area. And you guys are giving us great feedback. This is actually really what we wanted. We didn't think that it would come tonight. We thought it would come maybe at the next DRC meeting. And we just had this as our starting point, right? This is the 2017 drawing. So we're like,
Right.
okay, Mike, let's just start there and get the ball rolling. I think what we'd love to do is to come back to a DRC meeting after your voting meeting and really kind of dive into what is the architectural character, vibe, feel, what does this feel like, to kind of get this
yeah,
started.
that'd be great.
Yeah, totally agree. Because this was just more of a massing model for
Yeah.
us to understand what we could do here.
This meets the zoning criteria. It's got the 20-foot recess in the front, it's pulled up to the sidewalk, it's got parking underneath, it's got the finished
Yeah.
floor elevation. I mean, this is just a massing set.
Yeah, and I think, from that perspective, it's a good place to start. And then I would, in my mind, it's like, okay, feels like a max extent box, right? It's like, okay, now think of it in a subtractive fashion. Like, okay, if I pull this back here or there or add a little detail to this certain parapet, does it make the other one feel less so that we get a little scale difference, differentiation? Are we, not copying the windows from elevation to elevation? Maybe it's per suite, kind of like you go down on Main Street, there's the building with Starbucks in it is several suites, but there's a language across it that's common, right? And then you get a suite that doesn't relate to anybody except themselves and another one.
Sure.
So thinking of it in that regard where, maybe this were, it is 2 lots. Maybe it's three lots wide, in terms of an urban core. Maybe it's 3 suites and they were built at different times and now we've got a language that is appropriate for a streetscape. And then things like, this driveway hole into the parking garage. Can it go further back to function? Is there, those type of things are going to come up because, I'd love to see if y'all can, be creative enough to even come up with a way that this thing goes, I didn't even know there's a parking garage under this thing. I thought it was all building. Is there a way to do that? I don't know. That's a tall ask, especially when you have no friends near you to help block anything. You're pretty exposed until this develops more.
Yeah.
So what does it look like over time and how do you plan
And-
for all of it?
And to my mind, that's the lesson that we can gain from, as you say, the other side of town, where the massing is, right up on the street. And maybe you can make a case that it's the civic, the police building there's a reason for it to be so monumental and so imposing. And here, I love your active way, so that it doesn't overwhelm that way. And you're setting a precedent here for what's happening there. And it's such an important gateway into the city. It's really setting the tone. And if it doesn't have to be this monumental, massive monster of a building, that would be a win.
And I like your term, setting the tone.
Yeah.
It is a scenic corridor into downtown Franklin. So it doesn't detract from downtown, it leads you into downtown Franklin. And these new trends, at least I say they're new trends in urban planning, not having these massive parking lots and putting parking in other places, like even under these buildings. I mean, that's such a much better use of space and land.
And not putting you any under pressure, but this will set a template for the rest of the streetscape.
Yes,
when it's developed.
very much so.
Yeah, and fenestration's important. I think, this, I'm going to call it the third story. It's the second condition story. But those punched openings up there that are in the brick as opposed to these kind of ribbons of what look like storefront, probably more of the punched opening variety is more of a historic district kind of thing as opposed to kind of a office building strips and bands of glass. Those type of things make a difference. And does it feel like it's appropriate to the historic district? And it's not going to alienate. This is the fringe, right, of the district. And it's like, well, we have two choices kind of as a committee and commission. Is like, well, we can let the fringe be fringy, or we can really let that be our front line where we really have to draw a line in the sand, because if we concede on some of those things, all of a sudden the fringe starts to, the next discussion we have is, well, they're on the fringe and they did it, now we're kind of the fringe, and the fringe keeps moving in. And I think our job is to, hold the fringe out. And so making sure openings and materials and all that hold the line for us is important.
Okay.
Any other specifics?
so much.
Anything
This
else?
is great. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff announcements.
I'll be brief. If you have RSVP'd for the annual historic zoning training the legal training, on April 1st, a lunch order has been emailed to you. If you wouldn't mind, please fill it out through your city email as soon as possible. And for the historic zoning training poll, we're just waiting on 2 more responses to schedule a time. So hopefully we'll get those responses in and get that scheduled so y'all can put a save the date on your calendar.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
April 1st for the
Legal.
April Fool's Day.
Is it a joke?
Usually. No, I'm just kidding.
Kidding.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time and efforts this evening. Have a good evening. We are adjourned.